C266 Sealed Memories. I can seal your memories, but I don't know when the seal will break, and sealing memories was like putting the memory of each life in a different container. She didn't know when the container, seal, would break. There was a high chance that if containers broke in the wrong order, his memories would become blended. As an example, if his memories of the 10th life and 30th life mixed, the resulting memories would make no sense. He was Benjamin Clinton in his 10th life and Neo Thompson in his 29th life. If those memories mixed, he might think he lived only one life instead of two, and that life was named Neo Clinton. This was just one of the dangers of sealing memories. Are you sure you want me to seal your memories? Yes. He was escaping his problems. He thought King Morgan would call him a coward. But she looked at him with a kind smile. Huff, huff. Neo was left gasping when the memories ended. Find more chapters on Empire. His chest rose and fell heavily. What the hell are these memories? Seraphs were created in the age of gods. They started to reincarnate after the apocalypse arrived. But Neo had been reincarnating since hundreds of thousands of years before the apocalypse. He has been there when the first civilizations were budding. He had seen civilizations grow and merge and develop and finally come to an end due to the apocalypse. Neo had lived in each era. Why? He couldn't think of a cause for his reincarnations. Mystical quantities appeared on Earth only after the apocalypse. Reincarnation before that shouldn't be possible. No, I'm thinking wrongly. The cube from which the apocalypse started had been on Earth since long ago. Mystical quantities were always present on Earth. They were just hidden. I need to look into them if I want answers about me and my reincarnation. There were a lot of things Neo did not understand. He tried asking his blessing why he had been reincarnating, but he received only silence in return. Clicking his tongue, he stepped into the next door. The new shadow was a familiar face. It's you. The only life Neo originally remembered. He had been Kronos and Cleon's brother. An orphan. A boy who dreamed of achieving success at Nobleman at. The shadow bolted toward Neo with sharp movements. Neo killed the shadow without any hesitation. His red lightning crackled and split the darkness, shattering the familiar figure into nothingness. Even if the shadow belonged to the Neo, he knew, the one before him was nothing but a monster. And so this was how I used to look. Neo barely remembered anything from his original life. Devouring the shadows refreshed his memories. Shadow. Awakening progress. 31/33 right pointing arrow 32/33. Now that I think about it, why was the awakening progress 1/33 in the beginning? The question echoed in his mind. I don't remember devouring any shadow. It irritated Neo how he had no answers to his countless questions. Knowing thinking about it was wasting time, he stepped into the shadow door that appeared before him. Only one more shadow, and he would awaken the shadow element. The shadow element could mimic other elements. Neo was looking forward to using it. But, of course, it was not going to be easy. The shadow of Neo Hargraves stood before him. The oppressive silence in the room tightened around Neo's chest. The shadow exuded a suffocating aura. Its form mirrored his current appearance, a humanoid mass of red lightning, crackling and hissing like a storm incarnate. Since Neo's awakening progress had been 1/33, it meant he had already devoured one shadow. He had hoped it was the shadow of Neo Hargraves. Unfortunately, his hopes were not answered. The shadow's red lightning surged, illuminating the darkness. It mirrored his every movement perfectly, every spark of power a reflection of his own. So, you're the final trial. Neo's fists clenched as arcs of lightning rippled through his body. He stood face to face to his own shadow. Knowing the shadow could use all abilities he could, he remained vigilant. Neither of them moved, their eyes locked, as if sizing each other up. Then, without warning, both figures surged forward at the same time. Their swords clashed together with a deafening explosion, sending shockwaves through the air and scattering arcs of energy across the floor. Neo gritted his teeth as the force of the impact sent him skidding backward, but he quickly regained his balance. Divine swordsmanship, semi-fourth stance, Ryu no Mai. In the blink of an eye, the shadow vanished, reappearing behind Neo with a brutal spinning kick aimed at his ribs. The fourth stance consisted of two techniques. A rapid footwork that allowed near-instantaneous movement and a volley of quick rapid slashes. Combining both made the user look as if they were dancing. The shadow used the movement technique part of the stance to catch Neo by surprise. Neo barely managed to raise his arm to block the blow. The shadow grinned, the red lightning making its face stretched, giving it an eerie appearance. Without warning, it launched another flurry of attacks, each strike moving with inhuman speed. Neo blocked and dodged, barely keeping up as the two exchanged rapid blows that sounded like thunder with every impact. Neo's sword cut through the shadow's midsection. But the shadow, showing no sign of slowing. It was as if his attack did zero damage. The shadow immediately retaliated by launching a devastating wave of red lightning from its outstretched hands. The electric surge shot through the air, aiming straight for Neo's chest. He raised his sword, and summoned darkness to block it. The two waves of energy collided in a burst of light, sending a shockwave that cracked the floor beneath them. The shadow tilted its head. A mocking smile played on its face. Divine swordsmanship, semi-fourth stance, Ryu no Mai. With a sudden shift, it vanished again. Divine swordsmanship, 7th stance, Tenraisen. It reappeared above him with a devastating downward slash. Neo twisted, narrowly dodging the attack. C267 learning, flow of battle. Neo rolled away to dodge the attack. The shadow dashed forward with a burst of speed. Before Neo could stand up, it closed the distance in an instant and swung its blade in a wide arc aimed at Neo's throat. Neo raised his sword just in time. Their weapons clashed with a deafening crack, the sound reverberating through the empty space. Sparks erupted from the collision, and briefly illuminated their identical faces. Neo pushed back, forcing the shadow to stumble a step, and used the moment to regain his stance. He retaliated with a downward slash, aiming to split the shadow in two. But the shadow twisted to the side, avoiding the strike, and countered with a thrust aimed at Neo's chest. Neo spun his blade in a circular motion, deflecting the thrust, and countered with a sharp kick to the shadow's midsection. The shadow staggered but quickly recovered, slashing horizontally at Neo's waist. The clash of steel echoed like thunder in the vast emptiness around them. The two of them were locked in an intense battle. Neither of them was giving the other an inch. However, slowly but surely, the shadow was gaining the advantage. It began to laugh as it pushed Neo. Hey, give up. You should know nobody can defeat their shadow. I'm the shadow that is the same as you, before you started this shadow element awakening process. I can use all of your techniques. I know you more than yourself. You can never win. Neo leapt backward, his feet skidding against the stone floor. The shadow pressed forward with a twisted grin. It was assured of its victory. Each of its attacks was aimed to kill. In its eyes, Neo's was barely keeping up thanks to his sharp reflexes. He parried and dodged, their blades dancing in a deadly rhythm that echoed through the empty space. The shadow feinted a high strike, then swept low, aiming for Neo's legs. Neo jumped, arcs of lightning trailing around his sword as he brought it down in a vertical slash. The shadow raised its blade to block, and the resulting clash sent both of them sliding back from the force. Hey. The shadow's shoulders shook as it struggled to hold back its laughter. Why aren't you talking? Did you lose your bravado after fighting someone who was the same as you? A wide grin was etched on its face. Neo remained expressionless. His grip on his sword tightened, the crackling lightning dancing along its edge. Fight. Neo. Fight or you will die. He. You can't save your world if you die. The shadow dashed forward again, faster this time. Neo braced himself as the shadow unleashed a relentless barrage of strikes. The air shuddered with every clash of their swords. Neo, you are going to die tilde. After I kill you, I will kill your friends too tilde. It was enjoying overpowering Neo. The shadow thrust its blade forward, but Neo sidestepped and swung upward, slicing through the air. The shadow ducked, then retaliated with a spinning slash that Neo barely managed to block. The force of the attack broke his stance. The shadow dove into attack and used the opportunity, but it had been a trap. Neo swung his blade in a wide arc. The shadow barely parried, sparks flying as their swords locked once again. Neo gritted his teeth and pressed forward, forcing the shadow to retreat step by step. Suddenly, the shadow shifted its stance. It feinted left, then struck right, its blade grazing Neo's arm. Ha. Got you. Can you stop talking like that? Neo cut off the shadow mid-sentence. It's sickening to hear you talk like a stupid hooligan when you have the same appearance and voice as me. His words ticked off the shadow. The creature's expression darkened and its eyes narrowed as it closed the gap in an instant. Just when Neo thought it would attack, it spun on its heel, swinging its sword in a full circle. The abrupt change in attack caught Neo by surprise. He raised his sword to block the attack. But the shadow didn't let up, following with a series of rapid strikes that forced Neo onto the defensive. The space itself seemed to collapse around the two as the intensity of the fight grew. Red lightning crackled erratically as their blades clashed again and again, illuminating lightless shadows. The shadow suddenly saw an opening. Neo overextended on a strike, leaving his side exposed. The monster slashed forward. Its attack sliced through the air and almost landed a clean hit across Neo's torso when. Neo sidestepped the attack as if he had predicted it. Discover more stories at Empire. The shadow blinked, confused. However, Neo ignored its confusion and stared at his arms, noticing the faint lines connecting him and the shadow. So that's how flow is used. The shadow attacked him while he wasn't paying attention. Neo shifted only a few inches to dodge the attack. The shadow smiled, thinking his careless dodging would get him killed. But against all expectations, he dodged successfully without even looking at the attack. His weird actions surprised the shadow. It attacked Neo again, but the same thing happened. Neo would dodge its strikes as if he had seen the future. Ellipsis dot. What is that? How are you dodging the attacks? Flow of battle. He could finally use the technique after months of training. You learned that technique now. Yes, I learned it right now thanks to you. The shadow grew tense. Knowing how powerful flow of battle was, it didn't dare to attack Neo without fully understanding his current capabilities. I thought you were too talentless to learn flow. To the shadow's question, Neo shook his head and spoke. Haven't you realized it? We can talk even though we have no mouth and body. Ellipsis dot exclamation mark. The shadow flinched. Neo continued, his voice calm yet piercing. I was thinking about it when I fought Zeus too. I could hear him use his technique names even though he was using chantless incantations, Neo said. Are you sure you weren't hallucinating? The shadow asked. I'm sure I heard him say. Partial divine transformation. And complete divine transformation, Neo answered. Even you. I could hear you say the names of the sword techniques. Ellipsis dot. But I never said the techniques. Names, the shadow said. I know. That's why it helped me learn the flow. The shadow instantly understood what Neo was talking about. It could do it because it was the Neo's shadow and almost an exact copy of him. Shadows were copies of their original. The higher synchronization they had with the original, the more accurate a copy they were. Even though Neo's shadow hadn't reached 100% synchronization, because it needed to devour Neo for it, the shadow had a very high synchronization. So that's what flow is, the shadow said. And here I thought it would be something very amazing. It was just the intent that everyone leaks unconsciously. Intent were one's thoughts that were created from their will. At Nobleman at. Depending on one's strength of will, aka willpower, they could manifest their intent. In other words, intent were one's thoughts that were given a form due to one's willpower. Neo, having overwhelmingly strong intent, could talk by projecting his thoughts outward. He didn't have a mouth. But he was emitting his thoughts. Intent. And others absorbed that intent and understood what he was saying. It was a primitive form of telepathy. The shadow felt absurd. Neo learned flow as soon as he understood that he was talking with intent. Aren't you worried I'll unlock flow too, now that I know how it works? The shadow questioned. Its tone was sharp and laced with mockery. Neo's glowing form remained unshaken. You can't use flow, he replied evenly. Even I could barely unlock it, and you aren't a 100% copy of mine. Your talent is worse than mine. There is no way you can learn it as quickly as I did. The shadow's face twisted at the blatant insult. Its crimson eyes glowed faintly. No one could stop their thoughts. In other words, everyone is projecting their intent outward at all times. Since it was an unconscious action, the intent projected outward was very weak. That's why others could not read that intent. Because it was weak. However, this was how flow worked. One needed to read the intent of their opponents. The shadow's thought aimed at Neo created intent about Neo. Even if Neo couldn't read all of its intent, he could read the intent directed at himself. This allowed him to read the shadow's thoughts and know how it was going to attack. To be honest, I don't think I would have been able to read others' intent so easily, Neo said. He added, but since you are my copy, the intent you create is quite similar to mine. That's why I could read your intent easily and it helped me understand how flow of battle works. Don't joke with me, the shadow glared at him. You learned just one technique. So what if you can predict my attacks? You still can't defeat me. Neo ignored the shadow's actions and tightened his grip on the hilt. I don't need to waste my time anymore since I learned what I had been trying to learn by fighting with you. I'll end this fight now. The shadow pounced on him. In response, Neo raised his sword. Divine Swordsmanship 8 Form. C268 How, Flow of Battle, Works 101. 5 minutes earlier, Neo and his shadow were locked in high-speed combat. While the shadow continued to press its advantage, Neo's mind was focused on something else. I still can't understand it. Why can we talk without having a mouth or a body? He tried to think hard for a solution. Eventually, he noticed something. The shadow's voice is the same as mine. How am I hearing it without having ears? How can I see without having eyes? His bloodline and elemental affinities were bonded to his soul. It made sense how he could use them without a body. But his physical senses were different. The answer was obvious when he thought about it. I can't see, or hear, or talk. Then what is this right now? How am I perceiving my surroundings? Neo hadn't realized it, but he was entering a state of enlightenment. It was true Neo had mediocre talent. For someone like him, enlightenment was something he could never hope to achieve even once. But Neo had a unique advantage. He had lived long. Far longer than one could imagine. The experience he gained from having thousands of years' worth of memory taught him a lot. His enlightenment wasn't born out of overflowing talent. It was the fruit of his wisdom and efforts. Let's think of it step by step. How do I talk without a mouth? His thoughts continued to churn. Despite being locked in a death battle, Neo was focused entirely on his enlightenment. The answer came to him in a flash. Intent. Intent was the only field where he had talent. After all, he had overwhelmingly strong willpower. I can talk to elementals with intent. I don't need to use my mouth for it. People spoke incantations to talk with elementals, but it was to strengthen their intents. Those with strong intent, like Neo or Zeus, could use incantations without saying them out loud. This technique was called chantless incantations. It involved projecting one's intent outward and communicating with elementals. So my shadow and I've been talking with intent. But what about my other senses? Why can I hear the clashes of our swords and see the shadow take a stance? Is it because of intent too? It was as if Neo's body was on autopilot. Neo continued to fight the shadow while analyzing intent. He tried to delve deeper and focused on his surroundings. And, single quote ellipsis dot exclamation mark question mark single quote. What is this? The moment he understood he was talking thanks to intent, he realized another fact. All of his senses were working by perceiving intent of his surroundings. To Neo, it was as if a new world had opened up. Everything has intent. The sword, the ground, even sounds. They all have intent. He had been short-sighted, thinking only living beings could have intent. I thought the abilities born out of intent manipulation were limited because I had a powerful intent and there wasn't much I could do with it. He had wrong. Very wrong. There is more to intent. A smile played on Neo's lips. Finding the answers he had been searching for months made him happy. Neo finally focused on the shadow. He could see countless intents the shadow was emitting. Its desperation, fear, anger. All of its emotions were clear to Neo. This is what intent can do. He tuned out the unnecessary intent he was absorbing from the shadow and focused on the intent that contained the shadow's thoughts about Neo. Instantly, he saw countless lines originating from the shadow and landing on different parts of his body. These are the attack paths the shadow is thinking of using to attack me. Intent allowed Neo to read the shadow's thoughts. He dodged the shadow's attack and murmured. So this is flow of battle. Neo realized one thing. Flow of battle was a small part of what intent could do. According to Cain, flow of battle allowed one to predict their opponent's attacks. But Neo could also see his opponent's thoughts and emotions. Unlike others who gained enlightenment due to their talent and didn't understand how their abilities worked, Neo's enlightenment came from his experience. He understood everything about the flow of battle technique because he had learned it from the scratch. After talking a bit with the shadow, Neo decided to end things. Divine swordsmanship, 8 form. Suddenly, Neo stopped. At nobleman at. He lowered his sword. Never mind. It's a waste to make you the first person who would experience Cain's 8th technique, Neo said. I want it to be someone who deserves this technique, not low-level monsters I can defeat easily. His words gave the shadow a pause. The monster's face contorted. How dare you? How dare you call me a low-level monster? The shadow pounced on Neo, but he dodged the monster easily. The ease with which Neo dodged the attacks made it seem as if he was predicting the shadow's attack. I am you. A shadow knows the original better than themselves. If you can use that technique, then I can too. The shadow dug into its memories. Due to having a high synchronization with Neo, it had a lot of Neo's experiences and memories. I can gain enlightenment if I use his memories and experiences. The shadow thought. I wouldn't recommend looking into my memories. Ha ha ha, you are trying to stop me from gaining enlightenment. Don't try to hide the good stuff, Neo. The shadow stopped speaking, and it froze. Silence. A few seconds later, the shadow started to laugh. Then it cried. What are the sea memories? Why are Theraso man? Why memories I cannot bear so much? The shadow hit its head on the floor repeatedly, laughing, crying, and shouting. It threw the sword away and started to claw at its throat. That's why I told you to not peek into my memories, Neo said. Your synchronization with me isn't 100%. That means your willpower isn't as strong as mine. There is no way you can stay sane after seeing all of my memories with weak willpower. C269 The Life of Neo Hargraves. Neo had huge amount of memories. The hundreds of years of his own lives. The thousands of people whom he purified with his blessing and gained their memories. And lastly, the fourth vision of Sphinx where he spent eternity. The memories of eternity were sealed by his mother, but the emotions he felt during those countless years were not sealed. Despair, hollowness, fear, grudges, insanity, love, ambition. Everything Neo gained during the eternity was still with him. The shadow saw everything at once when it looked into Neo's memories. Its foolish actions tore apart its sanity. I didn't want to leave. I hate living. Someone kill him. Please, 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 please kill him. The shadow screamed. Before Neo could do anything, the shadow exploded, having killed itself. Neo stared at the remains of the shadow. Shaking his head, he devoured it. The memories of Neo Hargraves poured into Neo. He was born to two humans who didn't awaken their demigod lineage and he had an older brother. Unlike Neo Hargraves, who had a healthy physique like his mother, Henry Hargraves had a very weak body. It led him to develop an inferiority complex against Neo. The relationship between the brothers had been strained since childhood. Neo Hargraves didn't pay much attention to it. He was content with his life. The Hargraves family was a sub-clan of the Hephaestus clan. The High God clan treated his family nicely even though they didn't have any demigods in their lineage. Neo Hargraves had been happy. But everything changed during the Centennial Tournament. As an event that happened once in a century, it was highly celebrated, and almost every member of the Hephaestus clan participated in it. The day, which should have been one of the happiest of Neo's life, was torn apart when the sky shattered, and thousands of eyes poured out of broken sky. A storm brewed in the skies above the arena, turning daylight into an ominous twilight. The crowd's cheers turned to screams as grotesque monsters descended. They were a mass of writhing eyes that seemed to pierce through souls. Just looking at the grotesque monster made Neo Hargraves' eyes burst, and he was turned into a cripple. Neo Hargraves thought he would die. The only thing he remembered was his mother's voice telling him everything would be okay. His parents left saying they would do something about the monster. They never returned. Only Neo Hargraves and his older brother Henry Hargraves were left. Brother. Mom and Dad. Hick. Where are they? Neo Hargraves remembered crying in his brother's embrace. Both of them hid under the wreckage, praying the thousand-eye abomination wouldn't find them. I'll go and look for Mom and Dad. It has been hours since they went out and didn't return, the little Henry had said to Neo. Don't go. I'm afraid. Neo kept the words he wanted to say in his heart. He understood it. At Nobleman at. His brother hated him, and now Neo was a cripple who could die at any moment. He was a burden. Instead of sticking with Neo, it was better for Henry to escape alone. Hey, what are you thinking? Henry had flicked Neo's forehead. There is no way I will leave my little brother alone and escape myself. Henry understood Neo was afraid, and he decided to stay with Neo instead of searching for their parents. The last thing Neo Hargraves remembered was his weak-willed big brother saying he would protect Neo. When Neo woke up, a week had passed since the incident. They called it the Void Window number 8477 incident. The complete Hephaestus clan was annihilated. The only survivors were Neo and Henry Hargraves. The change hit Neo hard. The little child couldn't even cry. He would have killed himself to escape the nightmares of the thousand-eye monster if not for Henry, who had matured from the incident, being with him. Fortunately, there was a blessing in disguise. The inheritance of the Hephaestus clan was divided between Neo, Henry, and a few remaining members of the Hephaestus clan who didn't attend the tournament and thus managed to survive. Henry used the settlement money to start a new business, and he made it into one of the biggest business empires within one generation. There were a lot of hurdles Henry had to face. During those times, Neo was assassinated without Henry's knowledge. But someone, knew Neo, replaced him. The assassination happened again. Another, knew Neo replaced him. It repeated several times until the Neo who died to a zombie transmigrated into the body of Neo Hargraves. Shadow. Awakening progress. 32 33 right pointing arrow 33 33. So this is what everything was about. Neo massaged his head. Gaining the memories allowed him to understand a lot of things. Every time he was assassinated, the seal on one of his previous life's memories would break. The broken seal would dissolve into raw energy and revitalize Neo's damaged body and soul. The breaking of seals healing my injuries is too good to be a coincidence. The only reason I can think of is King Morgan making the seals this way. The more Neo thought about it, the more ridiculous it became. There were never different people transmigrating into Neo Hargraves' body. All of them were my previous lives' selves whose memories got mixed up with other lives, and they started to think they were different people. Neo didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was really ridiculous. And here I was thinking I needed to make sure Henry didn't realize I had hijacked his brother's body when I first transmigrated. Though there is still something I don't understand. How can someone assassinate me multiple times in my own house? There is no way a normal assassin can fool Henry's senses multiple times and assassinate me without getting caught. Neo thought of a culprit candidate, but immediately shook his head. There is no way he can be the assassin. Just as he finished his contemplation, a new power exploded from within his core. He could feel his shadow affinity successfully awakening. It allowed Neo to sense the giant presence that was looking down at his trial. Looked enough. He stared at the sky. The entity smiled and snapped, creating a door for Neo to leave the trial. Before I go, there is something I want to ask you, Neo said to the entity. Why didn't my shadows appear inside shadow windows? Neo would have never needed to enter the shadow world if his shadows manifested in windows. C270 failed gamble. Neo felt as if the entity in the sky was chuckling. The sky seemed to ripple like waves in a midnight sea. The entity above snapped its fingers, and a doll appeared before Neo. She bowed. Her porcelain face was devoid of emotion and her movements were unnaturally smooth. I'm number 23, one of the gatekeepers of the shadow world, the doll said, her voice soft but carrying an unsettling echo. I will be answering you on behalf of the Supreme. I thought the Shadow Supreme wouldn't bother answering me. The Shadow Supreme is a generous ruler. He is happy to answer the warriors who show a worthy performance to him, she said. Neo clicked his tongue in irritation. In the end, he was just an entertainer to the Shadow Supreme. So, what's the reason? Why didn't my shadow appear inside shadow windows? Because the Supreme stopped your shadows from appearing inside the shadow window. Her words made Neo freeze. The doll continued speaking. Her unblinking were eyes fixed on him. The Supreme wanted to know what had become of the cursed bloodline. That's why he stopped your shadows from leaving. He knew you would come to this world to find your shadows, and it would allow the Shadow Supreme to meet you. What? Neo's mind spun. He didn't understand why Supreme would bother with a human from a non-elemental world. Supremes ruled over elemental worlds. They were existences beyond gods. Your bloodline is unique, the doll said. Of course, the Shadow Supreme could meet your shadow to see what was happening with your bloodline. But he wanted to meet the original Neo Hargraves, not a shadow. Neo frowned. I need to think calmly. She said a lot of things I don't understand. His thoughts churned. Cursed bloodline. Does this mean something is wrong with my bloodline? Before Neo could say anything, the doll opened her mouth, her voice final. We've answered everything. You can leave now. She snapped her fingers, and the world around him twisted. Neo felt a shift, and suddenly, he was standing next to a giant tree, the Typhon's core. They teleported me out of the Shadow Awakening trial without answering all of my questions. Frustration burned in his chest. Shaking his head, he focused inwards. The chaotic energy around him pulsed, responding to his intent. I've awakened Shadow Affinity. Let's try it. The Shadow element allowed the user to mimic other elements. The level of mimicry depended on the user's understanding of the mimicked element. I should try to mimic an element that I don't have an affinity with but have a high understanding of it. It would be. Black light surged from Neo's palm. It was faint but stable. Mimicked holy element. I can use it. Being attacked by holy element too many times had allowed him to gain a little understanding about it. Needless to say, Neo's mimicked holy element was weak. He had only a little understanding of the holy element, but it would change after he practiced more. This confirms the shadow element awakening has completed. A smile spread on his face. He stopped using the mimicked holy element and activated the essence breath spell. The mimicked divine energy in the surroundings, previously poisonous, now flowed into Neo's core. Thanks to his awakening, the mimicked divine energy was no longer harmful to him. His core was filling at a swift pace. Suddenly, Neo felt something change inside him. Essence breath spell. Rank. Tremor. Mastery. Apprentice right pointing arrow adept. A vortex formed around him, swirling violently as mimic divine energy poured into his body without pause. The air hummed and the ground beneath him cracked under the sheer force of the pull. Neo's ability to drain the divine energy from the surroundings had grown multiple times as soon as the spell's mastery ranked up. When his divine energy reserves reached a sufficient level, he activated the third stage of his blessing. Regeneration. Bones began to materialize within the humanoid figure of lightning that was his body. The structure formed rapidly, joints snapping into place, ribs aligning perfectly. Organs followed, glowing faintly as they took shape, then muscles wrapped around the bones like woven cords. Nerves branched out like veins of light, connecting everything, and finally, skin enveloped it all, restoring Neo's appearance. Neo gasped, his chest rising and falling as he took his first breath with a fully regenerated body. Holy fuck, that felt terrible, he muttered. He moved his limbs experimentally, flexing his fingers and rotating his shoulders. A frown formed on his face. Damn it, it seems like this isn't counted as a proper resurrection. I'm still dead. His heart was beating, and blood flowed through his veins, but it was all sustained by the third stage of his blessing. Neo could feel that his bodily functions would stop if he were to cut the supply of his blessing. Body and soul are usually fused into each other, he muttered. But right now, I'm forcing my soul to stay inside my body. They are not fused. Maybe I need to awaken the third stage fully for it. Neo clicked his tongue. He had gambled everything on this attempt and lost. Fuck, looks like I'm going into the underworld. The pull of death grew stronger, like an invisible chain tightening around his soul. He had been forcing himself to stay alive for almost an hour, but his limits were rapidly approaching. Then, the world shifted. The energy vortex collapsed, and his surroundings changed abruptly. Neo found himself beneath a dark sky, where three giant eyes loomed overhead, each radiating a cold and oppressive gaze. The air was thick with dark energy, heavy and suffocating. This is. Neo frowned, scanning his surroundings. Blackened ground stretched endlessly, broken by jagged spires of obsidian that glowed faintly with crimson cracks. I'm in the underworld. It was the underworld he knew, yet it was somehow different. A nagging feeling told him he wasn't in his underworld he knew. But the truth before his eyes was different. Where am I? He muttered. He should have appeared inside the deep hole filled with life energy, the one that had trapped him during his last visit. As he prepared to move, he felt something shift within his clothes. How did these flags get into my pocket? The clothes he wore were given to him by the underworld, starkly different from the ones he had worn in the world of the living. Yet, the flags were unmistakably familiar. Barbados had given them to him, and Neo had. These flags should have been destroyed when Zeus pulverized my body. He paused, and the realization dawned on him. I guess they're bonded to my soul. That's why they always appear next to me. Neo's hand tightened around the fourth flag. His heart pounded, and a mix of anxiety and anticipation coursed through him. He had been planning to ask Barbados to give him new flag and flag posts, but this was better. I hope this works. The reason he had been enduring hell and worse was to complete the fourth trial of Barbados. Surpass yourself. That was the fourth trial. I'll be fucking pissed if Awakening Shadow Element wasn't the fourth trial, Neo thought grimly. He prepared to insert the flag into the post. C-271 SSS rank. Faryab, Afghanistan, Shadow World. Perses, the Titan of Destruction, lay sprawled at the bottom of a massive crater. The jagged walls towered above him. His bruised and battered body glistened faintly under the dim sky. Thick, dark clouds churned above, crackling occasionally with streaks of violent lightning, casting eerie shadows across the barren wasteland. He stared upward, his vision unfocused, lost in a daze. A faint buzzing broke the silence. His device was ringing. With a groan, he picked it up and held it to his ear. Perses, seeing as how you picked up the call, I guess your fight with Gaia ended. Kronos' voice came through. Quote ellipsis. Quote. Perses said nothing. Don't think about it too much. It was obvious you would lose. Why? At Nobleman at. Gaia is SSS rank. I'm not asking about her rank. Perses interrupted. I'm asking why did this happen? The question hung in the air for a moment before Perses continued in a bitter voice. Gaia is always in a semi-synchronized state with the world core. She does that to stop the world from causing natural disasters and wiping out humanity. His words carried an edge of frustration. She can't exert strength beyond that of an S-rank awakener due to it. That's why I came to fight her. I knew I could defeat her. But why the hell did she suddenly go all out? It's not like I was trying to kill her. There was a pause before Kronos spoke. Sunshine has disappeared. The sentence snapped Perses out of his daze like a bucket of ice water. His eyes widened, and his grip on the device tightened. Sunshine disappeared. Yes, Kronos confirmed. Doesn't that mean Neo Hargraves killed Sunshine? And probably Apollo too. Crazy guy, Perses muttered, rubbing a hand over his bruised forehead. The Awakener Association treated their members like family, and Apollo, the youngest among them, was doted on excessively. The thought of Gaia snapping because she believed Neo had killed Apollo suddenly made sense. She hadn't gone all out because she thought Zeus would protect Apollo, Kronos continued. But now that she has done it, we need to move too. Perses gritted his teeth, understanding Kronos's implications. With Gaia stopping her continuous synchronization with the world core, the balance she maintained would shatter. The world core would soon begin its rampage, unleashing thunderstorms, tsunamis, and earthquakes across Earth. Use the space-time cube to teleport Awakeners too. Kronos began listing the locations of major cities that would be hit by disasters. Perses needed to send Awakeners there and start rescue operations. After delivering his instructions, Kronos hung up. Perses stared at the device. It wasn't hard to guess how Kronos knew the locations of the impending disasters. He must have regressed. Perses muttered bitterly. Damned monsters. Does it make sense that he can time travel so easily? He clenched his fists with a frustrated expression. That Gaia too. It's too absurd to think she's the one responsible for stopping natural disasters from destroying humanity. The understanding of it all made him sigh heavily. SSS rankers were on an entirely different level. They were gods in the skin of humans. ... Gap of dimensions, between Shadow World and Earth dimension. We don't have much time to waste on you, said a number 22, her voice cold and mechanical. The doll's polished porcelain face was eerily expressionless as she addressed Jack. Tell us what reward you want, and the Shadow Supreme shall grant it. Then you shall leave. Jack clenched his fists, trembling with barely contained rage. His brindled anger blazed behind his sharp glare as he stared at the gatekeeper. He attempted to summon his legion, but no matter how hard he tried, his abilities refused to activate. It is useless, the doll stated, her tone devoid of empathy. Now tell us your wish. Fine. Jack ground his teeth. His jaw tightened as he spat his demand. Send me back to the same shadow world and allow me and Neo to leave that world whenever we want. That's my wish. Silence. The doll was surprised by his demand. She spoke a few seconds later. Are you sure you want to waste your wish on such a meager reward? Her tone was devoid of warmth, yet her words carried a faint echo of curiosity. We know your world is destroyed, but you don't need to worry about your life. As we've said, the Shadow Supreme is a generous ruler. He won't send you to a destroyed world but instead to a different one, where life still remains. You should ask for a different reward. I've said what kind of reward I want. Jack's voice was sharp, cutting through the doll's offer. Neo could have asked for the same reward, but Jack knew he wouldn't. Neo decided to stay behind, he thought bitterly. He would definitely ask for his shadow element to awaken so he can survive by using mimic divine energy. Are you sure? The doll pressed. The Shadow Supreme has been generous in giving you a passing grade on the disastrous result you've shown in the Shadow trial. If you think we would be generous again and allow you to ask for a second wish, then you are sorely mistaken. Yes, I've decided on my wish, Jack said firmly with clenched fists. Very well. Your wish shall be granted. The doll raised her porcelain hand and snapped her fingers. A dark doorway formed from the surrounding shadows, its edges crackling with faint tendrils of dark energy. Jack stared at it for a moment before stepping through. The oppressive atmosphere of the gap of dimensions vanished, replaced by the thick, stifling air of the shadow world. Jack's surroundings materialized, and he found himself standing next to Typhon's core, the spot where he had initially left the shadow world. A long sigh escaped Jack's lips. His tense shoulders relaxed slightly. That was scary, he muttered, running a hand through his hair. I was worried the Shadow Supreme might kill me for shouting at him. He smiled bitterly and scanned the area. Where is that damned team leader of mine? He grumbled. His irritation was evident as his eyes darted around. I'm going to give him an earful this time. Why the hell did he stay here without telling me what was happening? Jack's complaints were cut short as he sensed a terrifying presence rapidly approaching. The air grew colder, and an oppressive force bore down on him, making it hard to breathe. A figure landed in front of him with a thunderous impact, shaking the ground beneath his feet. The sheer force of her arrival sent cracks spidering through the earth. You must be Jack Hanma, the woman said coldly. Her emerald green eyes burned with intensity as she stared him down. Her movements were precise, almost too smooth to be natural. Jack's breath hitched as he realized who she was. She was Gaia. Her mere presence exuded overwhelming power, her aura pressing down on him like an unrelenting tidal wave. You have 3 seconds to tell me the location of Neo Hargraves, Gaia muttered coldly. Jack's instincts screamed at him to fight or flee. But his body refused to move. Her terrifying pressure had frozen him in place, rendering him helpless against her. C-272. Double breakthrough to next rank. Jack felt his body freeze. The air around him was heavy and suffocating, as though an unseen force pressed down on everything. The faint rustle of leaves in the distance was drowned out by the pounding of his own heart. There is no way she is only S-rank. Emma and Apollo had told him Gaia was an S-rank awakener. But the terror he was feeling told him she was far stronger than that. I asked you a question. Gaia's voice cut through the oppressive silence. She stopped speaking and frowned, turning towards Typhon's core. The towering tree pulsated faintly with an eerie green glow. Typhon is asleep. She placed her hand on the tree's trunk. What did you and Neo Hargraves do to Typhon? Neo handled it just as he said he would. Jack's voice quivered. He struggled to speak due to the overwhelming pressure of Gaia. She reined in her pressure, and the oppressive atmosphere lightened, allowing Jack a breather. The breeze returned, carrying with it the faint scent of charred wood and damp earth. A few moments later, Zeus arrived, carrying Apollo in his arms. At nobleman at. Both of them had been healed by Gaia before she met Jack. The air grew tense once again as Zeus stared at Jack with a stern gaze, while Apollo remained unconscious. Gaia closed her eyes, her focus entirely on analyzing Typhon's condition. Her presence, even subdued, felt like a tempest barely contained. Jack, on the other hand, had different worries. Where did Neo disappear to? Don't tell me he had a different way of leaving the shadow world and he left using it. Ha ha ha. I didn't waste my reward, right? Underworld, shadow world. Neo inserted the flag into the flag post with a soft click. I guess this counts as the trial being completed. Yes, it does, oh great child of monarch. Neo turned around when he heard the familiar voice. Barbados stood there, his form hidden by the robe that danced like black flames. The Grim Reaper's familiar appearance brought a smile to Neo's face, but it quickly vanished as Neo sensed something. He frowned. You are just a projection. Not the real Barbados. Indeed, it is something akin to a hologram, Barbados said. He was surprised Neo noticed it so quickly. It seems you have progressed quite a bit on the path of intent, Barbados said. The hologram in front of Neo's eyes was made of intent. It was supposed to manifest when he completed the 4th trial. So what was the 4th trial about? Neo asked. I've completed it, but I still don't understand what it was supposed to teach me. Barbados looked at Neo with a serious gaze. The trial was to surpass yourself. You had to gain an achievement unique to yourself. Although Barbados didn't say it, he was surprised when he looked at Neo's condition. Adept mastery in intent, a never-before-seen concept of death. And he managed to gain the memories of all his previous lives. Barbados bowed. I'm deeply honored to witness such achievements, O great child of monarch. You've surpassed our expectations. Neo rejected his bloodline's concept of impartial death and gained a new, unique concept. To add upon it, for the first time, he had managed to sustain the memories of his previous lives, completely. Just one of the two would have been enough for him to complete the 4th trial. That was the 4th trial. Neo had to achieve something that distinguished him as Neo. Something that proved he was more than just the son of Hades. Barbados raised his head and looked Neo in the eye. O great child of monarch, there is a lot we want to say. However, this intent projection cannot last for long. We will be direct, please pardon us, Barbados said. His tone carried the sense of urgency. This is the underworld of the shadow world. Even though you were in the past, you can use the Soul Hunter badge you were given for your 5th trial. The 5th trial is to become a Grim Reaper and go through ennoblement. Please visit Grand Duchess Paimon when you have time. She will help you hide that you are from the future. Before Neo could interject, Barbados continued. Grand Duchess Paimon will be in the mansion you've met her the first time. With those final words, the hologram of Barbados flickered and disappeared, leaving Neo stunned. The oppressive quiet of the underworld pressed in around him. How the fuck did he know I'm in the past? Neo's thoughts raced. While Barbados could have guessed he had entered the shadow world, there was no plausible explanation for how he knew Neo had gone to a past world. Confused, Neo massaged the bridge of his nose. Let's just do things one by one, he muttered to himself. He began searching for a quiet place to gather his thoughts. The dense forest was filled with towering, twisted trees, their branches forming grotesque shapes that cast long, shifting shadows. After an hour of wandering, Neo found a hollow area inside one of the massive trees. The hollow was spacious, its walls glowing faintly with an unnatural green luminescence that seemed to pulse in time with his breathing. Neo entered and sat cross-legged in the center. It's time I made my breakthrough, he said. Focusing inward, Neo brought up his status screen. Mind invasion, grade 5 awakened. Progress. 100%. Eternal, grade 5 mythic. Progress. 100%. The battle with Zeus had pushed his progress to its limit. It was good news. He could finally rank up. Neo closed his eyes, calming his breaths as the world around him seemed to still. The air trembled, and the mimic divine energy of the underworld surged toward him, forming a swirling vortex. His core began to glow faintly, resonating with the rhythmic thrum of his heartbeat. Hours passed in this state, the tension in the air growing thicker with each moment. Suddenly, a crackling sound echoed within him, like glass shattering under immense pressure. Neo's aura surged, the light of his core intensifying. His blood began to glow with a faint golden hue as a fierce wind rippled outward, rustling the leaves far above. When he opened his eyes, they glowed sharp and bright, filled with immense power. I've completed the breakthrough, he said. Neo's body felt weightless, yet every fiber of his being hummed with immense strength. Status, he called out. The screen materialized before him. C273. Meeting an old friend. Neo Hargraves. Rank. Grade 4 Mythic. Divine Energy Purity. Grade 5 Empyrean. Stats. Strength. 226. Speed. 241. Dexterity. 236. Constitution. 220. Luck. 0. Affinity. Death. Shadow. Darkness. Void. Water. Time. Magic spells. Necrotic Touch. Ocean's Embrace. Essence Breath. Rewind Enchantment. Black Dawn of Despair. Incantations. O death, be my hands, crush my enemies. O death, become my blade. Trait. Bloodline trait. Monarch of Death. Fragmented trait. Mind invasion. Quest. Complete Barbados. Training Part 1 completed 4/5. Find a way to assimilate the mind invasion trait, fragmented, into yourself permanently. End of the world questline. My divine energy purity jumped to Empyrean rank, Neo muttered. It must have been because both of my traits ranked up at once. Mind invasion, grade 4 awakened. Progress. 0%. Eternal, grade 4 mythic. Progress. 0%. Neo checked the changes in his status. Death. Mastery. Expert lowest. Concept. Eternal sleep. Darkness. Mastery. Adept peak. Concept progress. 60%. Shadow. Mastery. Apprentice high. Time. Mastery. Apprentice peak. Water. Mastery. Apprentice high. These masteries are more or less as I expected, Neo muttered. His understanding of shadow element had been high, especially because he was living in a 100% synchronization shadow world for past 9 months. As soon as he awakened shadow element, his mastery jumped to high apprentice instantly. Neo was analyzing his status when a sudden presence disrupted his focus. Peeking out of the hollow, his eyes widened. Familiar figures emerged from the shadows. Their movements were stiff yet menacing. You saw my face. You saw my face. I'll kill you. One of them shrieked. They followed me into the underworld. Neo muttered, unsure whether to be impressed or frustrated. The army of statue-like monsters advanced toward him, their stone forms grinding ominously. Neo sighed, raising his hand lazily. Before they could take another step, he snapped his fingers. A wave of death energy rippled outward, spreading like a dark tide. The oppressive silence of the underworld deepened as the wave consumed everything in its path. The statue monsters crumbled into dust a split second later. Their stone forms disintegrated under the wave of Neo's death energy without being able to put up any resistance. Neo exhaled slowly, glancing at the remains before walking away. After wandering for hours, Neo encountered several intelligent monsters, denizens of the underworld. These beings, unlike the mindless monsters, possessed awareness and were capable of communication. Talking with them confirmed Neo's suspicions. He was indeed in the underworld of the past. This is weird, Gods appeared after the apocalypse, and Dad hasn't shown up yet, Neo murmured to himself, his voice carrying through the still air. He frowned. Then who's managing the underworld? Eventually, Neo entered a town. A grim, shadowed place filled with spectral figures and Gothic architecture. The streets were dimly lit by flickering green torches, and whispers filled the air, blending with the mournful wails of the damned. The oppressive atmosphere was almost suffocating, but to Neo it was refreshing. His first destination was the Soul Hunter building, a tall, foreboding structure with jagged spires piercing the ever-dark sky. Inside, the place was bustling with activity. Transparent souls floated through the hall and monsters formed lines before the reception. Neo approached the reception desk, where a small, floating skull hovered behind a ledger. The skull turned to face him, its hollow eyes glowing faintly. "You are a new face," it said. "Yeah, I came from the eastern side," Neo spouted the first random bullshit that came to his mind. He took out his Soul Hunter badge and showed it to the skull. It confirmed the badge was real and opened its mouth. "At nobleman at. You're here for information, I assume," it rasped. After a brief exchange, Neo learned the requirements for becoming a Grim Reaper. You have to reach highest Soul Hunter rank, capture 100,000 souls, and reach expert mastery in death, darkness, shadow, holy, light, or life element. You'll also need a recommendation letter from a Grim Reaper, the skull said with an unnerving cackle. Neo froze, his expression blank. "What?" he muttered, his voice barely audible. What the fuck did he mean Neo had to capture 100,000 souls? That was 6 too many zeros. These requirements were too much. His frustration was clear as he massaged his brows. "These requirements are ridiculous," he grumbled under his breath. "The 5th trial might be easy in theory, but it's going to take forever." Before leaving, Neo asked another question. Who is the current ruler of the underworld? The skull paused, then tilted slightly, somehow managing to raise its non-existent brows. Our ruler is the great monarch Hades. Why are you asking such an obvious question? Neo maintained his composure. No reason. Outside, Neo walked through the shadowy streets, his expression calm, though his thoughts were anything but. So Dad is the current ruler of the underworld. Was he a god even before the apocalypse arrived? Lost in thought, Neo didn't notice the boy blocking his path until he nearly bumped into him. "Please wait," the boy said. Neo stopped, his eyes narrowing as he took in the boy's appearance. His face was bruised, his clothes torn and dirtied. Judging by his uncorrupted aura, he was likely a human who had recently arrived in the underworld. "Master is calling for you," the boy continued. "Master?" Neo asked with a sharp gaze. "Yes, she sensed your breakthrough. Who is your master?" "Grand Duchess of the Underworld, Paimon Lenoir, the 3rd-ranked Grim Reaper and Mistress of Darkness," the boy replied with a proud smile, clearly pleased to brag about his master. Neo's thoughts immediately turned to Barbados, earlier instructions. "Barbados told me to meet Paimon. I guess I should follow this kid." "Who are you?" Neo asked in a cautious tone. "Barbados," the boy answered with the same smile. "I recently became a Grim Reaper and received this name." Neo's eyes widened slightly before he masked his reaction. "I see." Inside, Neo wanted to sigh. So this is how Barbados and Tent knew I was in the past. Because the past Barbados met me here. He glanced at the boy again. Looks like paradoxes are starting to appear. Messing with time too much is always a headache. With a resigned shake of his head, Neo gestured for the boy to lead the way. "Take me to your master." C-274. Paradox. Association Headquarters, Turkey, Shadow World. After the battle between Neo and the Awakener Association, which resulted in a crushing defeat for the association, time passed like a blur. Neo's actions caused a lot of changes. Awakeners all over the world were in an uproar. The news spread that an Awakener had single-handedly defeated the Awakener Association and put Typhon in a deep slumber. It pissed off Emma when Jack wasn't given any credit. As for Jack himself, he couldn't care less about the news. His focus was on searching for Neo. Neo had disappeared from the face of the world. If not for a new vision of Apollo, which showed Neo fighting Typhon, Jack would have thought Neo had left the Shadow World. Since the vision confirmed Neo was still somewhere around, Jack decided to stay. He joined the Awakener Association temporarily. In the next few weeks, the Awakener Association demanded a reason from the Titans for supporting Neo during the previous battle. Kronos revealed his reason at the council meeting. "I helped Neo Hargraves because my intuition told me to trust him." It was a simple yet highly irresponsible reason. Unfortunately, The Awakener Association couldn't hold him accountable as Neo was right in the end, and Kronos was the leader of Titans. Kronos was an existence they couldn't judge easily. He was one of the only two SSS rank Awakeners. During the same council meeting, it was decided that the fact Jack and Neo were from the future would be hidden for obvious reasons. The council also demanded Jack to explain why he had stayed behind in the past after everything ended. The world is going to end because we couldn't save the child of Mana on time, Jack said. Neo and I've stayed behind because of it. A lot of Awakeners were skeptical of Jack's claim. To point out an obvious reason, if the future was destroyed, how were Jack and Neo still alive? They should have been dead because the future where they were born was destroyed. Jack, being someone who rarely paid attention in classes, didn't know how to explain the situation. His confusion was visible as he rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. At that moment, Kronos helped Jack. His friendly tone cut through the skepticism. They are alive because of paradoxes, Kronos began. Think about it, Kronos continued. If someone goes into the past and kills their grandfather, what would happen? The grandfather dies. If the grandfather dies, their grandchild is never born. If the grandchild is never born, he can't go back into the past and kill his grandfather. If the grandfather isn't killed, then the grandchild is born again, and he goes back into the past to kill his grandfather again. This is a paradox, Kronos explained, pacing slowly around the hall as his gaze met the eyes of each council member. It is a constantly changing past. Such changes cause deformities in the timeline. Kronos paused. He let the weight of his words sink in before continuing. Paradoxes can cause the timeline to break. That's why time deals with paradoxes itself. How do you suppose this happens? Time orders its servants to shut up, Atlas. Don't disturb me when I'm doing something important, Kronos said, giving a sharp glare to Atlas, who had been about to interject. Atlas chuckled awkwardly, and looked away, avoiding Kronos' glare. There are multiple ways time can deal with a paradox, Kronos continued. I'll explain it using the grandfather-grandson example I used earlier. First option is, time destroys whatever device was allowing the grandson to go back to the past. Kronos began, his voice calm yet authoritative. Secondly, time can punish the grandson by forcing him to go through unremembrance, or time slipping. Due to these, the grandson won't be able to return to the past and kill his grandfather. Third option is, the grandson is killed before he kills the grandfather. Let's say a truck kills him while he's going to the grandfather's house. This death is more of a death caused by fate rather than by time. Fourth option is, it turns out the grandson was adopted, or his mother had cheated, so killing the grandfather doesn't stop the grandson from being born and a paradox is not created. Kronos paused, scanning the room. The faint sound of shuffling feet echoed in the vast chamber as the Awakeners absorbed his words. This is what happens with small-scale paradoxes, he added. Then, his tone deepened. But what happens if it was a large-scale paradox? The air seemed to grow tenser as Kronos continued. Let's say the grandfather had developed a cure for cancer. His death will affect a lot of other people, and it will become the cause of a major paradox. How does time solve it? He allowed a moment of silence to draw attention before speaking again. It will try to use the previous options I've mentioned. But what if those options won't work? Kronos' eyes narrowed. Then, the council chamber seemed to hold its collective breath as he continued. Time will use forceful changes. The grandfather will be alive even if he has been killed by the grandson. Time will achieve this by merging the constantly changing pasts where the grandfather is killed and where he is still alive because the grandson was never born. Kronos observed the expressions around him. He noted the confusion that painted most faces. At nobleman at. Sigh, I'll explain it in simpler terms, he said. Time will bring the grandfather from the timeline where he was alive and put him in the timeline where the grandfather is dead. The explanation he gave was both wrong and right at the same time. Only one timeline could exist at once. In other words, two different timelines could not coexist. The appearances of paradoxes created deformities in a timeline, resulting in the branching of the timeline and causing multiple timelines to be born. However, since time didn't want multiple timelines to exist, it merged the timelines into one. This merging would cause the grandfather to exist even after he was killed. Because the grandfather was brought from the timeline where he was never killed and put into the timeline where he was killed. This type of solution is the last resort when time has no other way to solve the paradox. C-275. World Time Project. Kronos shook his head when he noticed that barely anyone understood his simplified explanation. A faint smile crossed his face. He understood the mechanism of timelines because he had been nearly erased by time multiple times. The ignorance of his peers only proved they had not yet suffered at the hands of time. He wished it would remain that way. Neo and his existence are the same, Kronos said, pointing at Jack with his chin. They should be dead, but their deaths would cause a major paradox. Thus, to solve the paradox, time allows them to exist even though they should have been erased. Jack blinked in stupefaction. Listening to Kronos refreshed his memory, and he was able to recall the lessons he was taught at the academy. Kronos's explanation had small problems, but it was mostly correct. The absurdity of it all left Jack in shock. The knowledge that the people of the future had gained after multiple generations was only marginally better than Kronos's understanding. Jack realized that Kronos's title of Father of Time wasn't just a symbolic decoration, it was well earned. The council meeting proceeded smoothly after Kronos's explanation. Much to Jack's relief, the council took Jack's words about the world's impending end seriously. We need to speed up the progress of the World Time Project, Ares said. Yes, I'm already working on it, Kronos replied without hesitation. Jack furrowed his brow. He had no idea what they were talking about, but it seemed important. He decided to wait until the council meeting ended and ask Emma for more information. One more thing, Kronos added. Nobody will ask about the knowledge of the future from Jack. His words were firm and left no room for objections. Asking him for knowledge of future will only cause more paradoxes to appear. It would be harmful to us. There is also a high chance fate will take harsh measures to stop us from taking advantage of future knowledge. The flickering firelight cast dancing shadows across Kronos's face, emphasizing the gravity of his warning. Around the room, the council members exchanged uneasy glances. Their expressions ranged from reluctant acceptance to grim determination. As soon as the meeting ended, Zeus approached Jack, his towering presence dominating the hallway. His piercing gaze bore into Jack as he demanded answers about Neo's whereabouts. Jack, maintaining his composure, firmly told Zeus that he didn't know where Neo was. However, Zeus's expression twisted with disbelief, which made his distrust clear. The tension between them grew thick, and the charged air was almost crackling. Zeus took a step closer, his voice lowering but carrying a dangerous edge. Their confrontation might have escalated into something far worse if not for Emma's timely interference. She stepped between the two and took Jack's side, much to Zeus' annoyance. Her calm but commanding demeanor forced Zeus to reconsider his options. Zeus reluctantly backed off, though the frustration in his eyes was clear. Despite Emma's intervention, Zeus didn't stop. He continued to approach Jack over the following days, persistently asking for any information about Neo and his father. Each conversation was as strained as the last. Zeus's suspicion never wavered. It took Jack dozens of days, countless firm denials, and a great deal of patience to finally make Zeus understand the truth. Jack knew nothing about what Zeus wanted to know. Only Neo had the answers, and they had no idea where Neo had disappeared to. After the problem with Zeus was solved, Jack was absorbed into the routine of a normal awakener working under the Awakener Association. It was not a good experience for Jack. The days in the association were long and grueling, with constant missions that pushed him to the brink of exhaustion. However, the physical strain paled in comparison to the social hostility he faced. Most of the awakeners in the association didn't like Jack. Their disdain was palpable, from the whispered gossip behind his back to outright criticism hurled in his face. The association's crushing loss against Jack and Neo had brought immense shame to its members, and many awakeners directed their bitterness at Jack. This resentment led to outright bullying. Jack, of course, wasn't the type to tolerate bullying, especially not when his bullies were weaker than him. Any physical confrontations ended quickly and decisively in Jack's favor. Yet, the constant hostile atmosphere at the association weighed heavily on his mind. The distrustful glances, the venomous words, and the sense of isolation created a mental burden that even Jack found difficult to bear. Eventually, Jack, now known by his alias, Erebus, decided he had enough. He left the Awakener Association and joined the Titans, much to Emma's dismay. She tried to stop him, but he remained firm in their decision. The Titans, always opportunistic, didn't stop with Jack. They also managed to recruit Daniel, the brother of the late child of Mana, into their ranks. From what Jack understood, the Titans had brought Daniel aboard for the World Time Project. The World Time Project was to inscribe a giant magic circle, World Time spell, at the Earth's poles. The purpose of the spell was to allow multiple people to travel 30 to 50 years into the past. Such extreme manipulation of time was beyond even Kronos, which was why the project required the construction of a massive magic circle to accomplish it. The process of building the world time spell was filled with challenges and tragedies. Numerous trials and errors marked its development, and the experiments involved frequent attempts to travel into the past. These experiments came at a steep cost. Many time mages, already a rare and valuable resource, lost their lives in the process. Time deaths, such as unremembrance and time slipping, were not uncommon. Even Kronos himself wasn't immune to the dangers of time deaths. This was where Daniel came in. At Nobleman at. Though Daniel's control over time was poor, he possessed very high resistance to time deaths. In simpler terms, his job was to become Kronos's experimental dummy. Time seemed to pass in a blur as everyone worked tirelessly to build a functioning society and stop the looming calamity. 39 years passed in this manner. C276 time skip. First appearance of Thanatos. 39 years later, savage expanse. The barren landscape stretched endlessly, marked by jagged cliffs and scorched earth. The air shimmered with faint traces of mana, creating a disconcerting hum that resonated in Emma's ears. Ash clouds loomed overhead and casted an ominous shadow over the thousands of awakeners gathered below. Damn it. At Nobleman at. Emma bit her nails as her gaze darted over the assembled forces. Her brows furrowed as she scanned the faces of the awakeners geared up for battle. Their armor glinted faintly in the dull light and they had grim expressions. Today, Typhon would wake up. Everyone had been preparing for this day for decades. The tension in the air was palpable, broken only by the occasional clang of weapons and nervous murmurs among the awakeners. But, did they think this as a joke? Emma hissed under her breath. Typhon's root had been burrowing deeper each day. The father of anomalies drained the energy from the earth itself. This relentless absorption allowed it to grow at a pace far faster than any awakener could ever hope to match. Its growth pace was second to none. Despite the colossal threat, Emma was the only heavy hitter in today's roster. She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms as a sense of frustration surged through her. However, she knew it was no one's fault. Poseidon was with the Titans, holding back the hordes of monsters pouring out from the Bermuda Triangle. Apparently, the place had a portal connection to another planet. The planet's environment was not inhabitable for humans and only powerful bloodthirsty monsters existed there. The monsters from there had been relentlessly invading Earth. Zeus was on the moon. The damned natural satellite had gained a mind of its own due to the evolution caused by mana. Zeus had to go there and stop it before it decided to crash into Earth and end everything. Gaia was preoccupied with the world core synchronization. It had reached its final stages, and Gaia couldn't leave it unattended. Ares and Athena were locked in combat with the Five Emperors, a rebellious group of awakeners led by 5 powerful leaders. They worshipped Typhon and sought to sabotage the Awakener Association's efforts to defeat the monster. Today, it was just Emma, Apollo, and Jack against Typhon together with a few hundred awakeners. The other awakeners were far from Emma or Jack's level and their job was only to deal with the minions of Typhon. The plan was simple. Hold back Typhon until reinforcements arrived. Once Ares and Athena defeated the 5 emperors and Zeus finished his task on the moon, they would rush to the savage expanse to assist in taking down the father of anomalies. Jack, now Erebus, was a reinforcement sent by the Titans. If the Awakener Association couldn't hold their ground, more reinforcements would follow. Still, it was reckless, bordering on suicidal, to leave only Emma, Apollo, and Jack to face Typhon. But there was no other choice. Every powerful awakener was tied up elsewhere, fighting battles just as critical. The more I think about it, the more it pisses me off. Why is Apollo still not here? Emma's voice cut through the tense silence, making several nearby awakeners flinch. They exchanged nervous glances and whispered amongst themselves. Hey, do something, or we'll get scolded because Sir Apollo isn't here. What am I supposed to do? Guys, just remind her Sir Erebus is coming. That might improve her mood. While they deliberated on how to pacify Emma, she suddenly raised her device and began speaking into it. Her voice was sharp, and edged with irritation. Apollo, where are you? It seemed Apollo had finally picked her call. She cocked her head, her expression shifting from anger to confusion as she listened to Apollo's reply. You aren't coming. Her voice faltered, and disbelief flashed across her eyes. Neo will handle Typhon. That guy has been missing for 4 decades. What do you mean? Hey, don't hang up. Emma's voice rose in exasperation, but the line went dead before she could say more. Her hands trembled as she lowered the device, her face contorted in fury. The other awakeners took a cautious step back. It's all that bastard's fault, she muttered through clenched teeth, her tone laced with venom. Apollo had changed after his defeat by Neo 39 years ago. Emma had no idea what Neo had told Apollo. But it changed Apollo. From a disciplined warrior who did what was necessary, he had turned into a deadbeat who did only what he wanted to do. And now, of all times, he had chosen to be unreliable. He was busy partying at this moment. I don't understand. Why is everyone always Neo this, Neo that? Even Jack pays more attention to him than me. Emma's words came to an abrupt halt as a violent tremor shook the ground beneath her. The barren expanse quaked. Dust rose in chaotic swirls as cracks spider-webbed across the terrain. The awakeners began shouting in alarm. Typhon is waking up. Shit, it's earlier than the estimated time. Our guys are still not fully geared up. Emma's expression darkened and her lips were pressed into a thin line. The ground beneath her boots vibrated with ominous intent, and a deep sense of foreboding settled in her chest. She reached out to summon her darkness powers, but a sudden, crushing pressure crashed down upon her like a tidal wave. Her knees buckled. A ripple of agony spread through the ranks of awakeners. Most collapsed and became unconscious. The few who managed to remain standing retched violently. Their faces were pale and drenched with sweat. The forest around them groaned as if alive. Trees twisted grotesquely. Their bark split to reveal monstrous faces and limbs. The ground cracked open, releasing swarms of hideous creatures that clawed their way to the surface. Shit. Emma's mind raced as adrenaline surged through her. This feeling. Typhon's strength is far higher than the predictions. She recalled Gaia's briefing. Typhon's root system absorbed energy from the earth, allowing it to grow at a terrifying pace unmatched by any awakener. Call for reinforcements. Emma barked the orders. Her voice rose above the chaos. This isn't something we can handle with our current numbers. Go. I'll buy time for you guys. There is no need for that. The calm voice cut through her shout like a blade through the haze of panic. A figure wearing tattered black robes stepped forward. His appearance was detached and almost surreal amidst the chaos. Unlike everyone else on the battlefield, he seemed entirely unaffected by Typhon's overwhelming presence. Emma turned to him. Her eyes narrowed. Who are you? The figure tilted his head slightly. His face was obscured by the shadows of his hood. It was as if darkness itself masked his features, making them impossible to discern. Yet his voice was strangely familiar. Gaia sent me, he replied evenly. My codename is. He hesitated, his posture stiffening slightly as if embarrassed. Then, through gritted teeth, he added. Thanatos. Emma's eyes widened in shock. She wasn't aware the Awakener Association had someone like him in their ranks. But she kept her doubts to herself. Rumors about Gaia's so-called knight had circulated within the association for years. They went like this. A knight protected Gaia from the shadows and he killed without fail whenever Gaia commanded it. Gaia never confirmed or denied these rumors and allowed them to fester in ambiguity. C277 times skip. First appearance of Thanatos, 2. Gaia must have told him to intervene if Typhon proved too much to handle. Okay, Emma said cautiously. The two of us should be able to hold back Typhon until reinforcements arrive. I don't need reinforcements. Thanatos interrupted her, unsheathing a black blade that radiated an eerie, consuming aura. The moment he slashed, a wave of destruction rippled outward. Typhon's minions, who had almost reached the Awakener's position, were bisected in a single strike. A moment of stunned silence enveloped the battlefield. Everyone, retreat, Thanatos commanded. His voice was as cold and sharp as his blade. Gaia has sent me to deal with Typhon. Before anyone could react, he raised his sword again and swung downward. The sheer force of the strike obliterated everything in its path, carving a direct route to Typhon's core. As he walked forward, one of the Awakeners whispered shakily. That black sword, isn't it the one Sir Apollo told us to watch out for? Emma's heart skipped a beat. Her gaze snapped to the weapon in Thanatos' grip, but before she could study it further, he was gone, disappearing into the haze of the battlefield. Damn it, how could I be so stupid? If his name is Thanatos, then of course it's him. Emma muttered under her breath. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet rumbled violently. All heads turned toward the source of the tremors, and they saw Thanatos thrown high into the air. Dust and debris scattered around, creating a smoky haze. Before Thanatos could retaliate, a burning tornado enveloped him. It spiraled upward like a pillar of fire and scorched the air around it. You're finally here. A booming voice roared. Standing at the source of the flames was Oni, the Sovereign of Flames, one of Typhon's direct servants. His molten eyes glowed with malicious delight as he pointed a clawed hand at Thanatos. Master has told us to kill you, with special attention. It's always amusing to hear a monster call another monster, Master. Thanatos' voice rang out from within the burning vortex, calm yet dripping with disdain. A beat later, the fiery tornado fractured. Uniform cracks appeared on the burning flames. They split into countless pieces as if cleaved by an unseen blade. The scattered flames dissipated into dying embers, revealing Thanatos standing atop a massive shadow summon in the shape of a bird, its wings spread wide as it hovered in the ash-choked sky. Don't speak in human language, he said coldly, his gaze locked on Oni. It's disgusting. Oni flinched. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple as he processed what had just happened. His flames that no ordinary awakener could withstand, had been effortlessly cut apart. Thanatos' piercing eyes briefly flicked to the two other sovereigns lurking in the shadows. They were biding their time for the perfect moment to strike. It's not me you should be fearing, he said, his voice cutting through the air like a razor. The ground shuddered again, more violently this time, as though responding to his words. The sovereigns tensed. The tremors, which they had dismissed as the aftereffects of Typhon's overwhelming aura, now felt different. They weren't caused by Typhon. It was something else. Something dangerous. It's him. The northern region of the savage expanse collapsed in on itself. The earth caved in as though devoured by an unseen force. A shrill, bone-chilling cry reverberated through the battlefield. And then it emerged. A monstrous worm, larger than a 15-story building and 10 times as wide, burst forth from the collapsing ground. Its segmented body gleamed with an unnatural sheen, and its circular maw was lined with thousands of razor-sharp teeth that glinted like bloodied knives. The air grew thick with the worm's bloodthirsty aura, suffocating everyone nearby. The creature let out another deafening shriek before lunging at the nearest cluster of monsters. Its colossal movements crushed the forest and the beasts beneath it, leaving a path of absolute destruction in its wake. Trees snapped like twigs, and the earth groaned under the sheer weight of its body. Emma's jaw tightened as she watched the carnage unfold. What is that thing? One of the awakeners stammered, his voice trembling with terror. Thanatos didn't answer. His gaze remained locked on the sovereigns, his expression as cold and unyielding as the blade in his hand. Devour them, Thanatos commanded. The worm opened its gaping maw, revealing thousands of razor-sharp teeth. A low, guttural sound reverberated from its depths as it began to inhale. The force of its suction moved the air. The trees closest to it were the first to go. Their trunks groaned and splintered as they were uprooted and pulled into the giant worm's mouth. The soil followed next. Great chunks of earth crumbled and vanished into the worm's maw. But it didn't stop there. The very essence of the savage expanse seemed to be consumed. The worm started to devour time. Monsters and the sovereigns froze, unable to move, as the worm was eating their time. Then, something astonishing happened. The monsters and the forest began to age backwards. They grew younger, and younger, and younger. Monsters howled in agony as their forms distorted and disappeared. The proud sovereigns of Typhon could do nothing. They realized, too late, the true nature of the worm's power. It wasn't merely consuming matter. It was devouring their time. Their bodies shuddered as the horrifying process continued. At nobleman at. The sovereigns' forms grew younger. Their features regressed with each passing second. Their mighty auras diminished. Their strength faded as they were forced backward through the sands of time. Panic flickered in their eyes, but they couldn't move. The worm's suction had them utterly paralyzed. And then, they vanished. First, their physical forms dissolved into the void. Then, their very existence was erased, as if they had never been. The suction intensified, and the surrounding forest began to disappear too. Leaves grew into buds, trees shrank into saplings, and finally, the ground itself aged backward into barren wasteland. Emma and the awakeners, standing far enough to avoid the worm's immediate attack, watched in stunned silence. The air around them felt heavy, suffused with an unnatural stillness. What just happened? One of the awakeners whispered in a barely audible voice. Emma's fists clenched as she surveyed the devastation. In mere moments, the lush expanse of the savage expanse had been reduced to a desolate wasteland. The vibrant greenery, the sprawling trees, the teeming life, all of it had been devoured, leaving behind only a barren desert. At its center lay Typhon's core. The giant tree pulsed like a beating heart, the only remnant of the once vast forest. The worm let out a final, ear-splitting cry before coiling into itself. Its body disappeared into the sands as quickly as it had emerged. Emma swallowed hard. What she had just witnessed shook her to the core. That thing, she whispered. Her voice trembled with a mix of fear and awe. It's beyond anything we've ever faced. The barren wasteland stretched out before them. It was a reminder of the worm's terrifying power. Of Thanatos' terrifying power. Thanatos ignored the commotion of the awakeners and commanded his shadow summon to take him to the Typhon's core. C-278 20 hours left for the world's end. Thanatos. Shadow summon landed gracefully before Typhon's core. The bird, a massive creature formed of shifting, liquid-like shadows, dissolved seamlessly into his shadow as he stepped onto the barren ground. The air itself began to tremble. Waves of invisible energy rippled outward as Typhon stirred. Its aura caused the space around it to distort. The giant tree at the center of the wasteland groaned and creaked, and its massive roots pulsated with pale light as it prepared to strike. Space twisted unnaturally, stretching the distance between Thanatos and Typhon's core to near infinite. But it's useless, Thanatos said. He killed the warped space with a casual snap of his fingers. It snapped back to normal and the distortion vanished as if the had never existed. Stretching space is like stretching a ribbon, he muttered. It only makes it easier to tear. The giant tree shuddered violently. The tremors caused cracks to form in the dry, brittle ground. Why are you even trying to fight? You, of all beings, should know it's impossible for you to defeat me, Thanatos said. The immense tree seemed to recoil. Its branches curled inward as if the words had struck a nerve and made it recall unpleasant memories. For decades, Typhon had focused on a singular goal, defeating Neo. After Neo's concept of eternal sleep had forced it into prolonged slumber, Typhon had dedicated all its strength to breaking free. Its roots had burrowed deep into the earth, absorbing the planet's energy to accelerate its growth. With this newfound power, it had reduced its forced slumber from 30 years to just 8, a feat that once filled it with hope and pride. Yet, each time it awoke, Neo returned to force it back into slumber. The cycle had repeated for decades. The air trembled again, but this time, it carried Typhon's intent, a raw, furious energy that lashed out like a storm. You dare come here again. The voice was not heard, but it resonated in the minds of all present. Its tone was dripped with murderous rage. Have you not done enough by humiliating me again and again? Why do you persist? It's not as if you can kill me. It's not like I can't kill you. Thanatos tilted his head. The corner of his mouth twitched. Wait, I think there's been some confusion. Typhon's branches quivered violently, its rage boiling over. What are you trying to say, spawn of death? I haven't killed you because I wasn't sure if your death wouldn't cause irreversible damage to the earth, not because I couldn't. Typhon froze. For the first time, it had no words. Its roots had not only been its lifeline but also the source of its power. They had formed a parasitic link with the world's core, allowing Typhon to draw energy directly from the planet. The reason Gaia had been increasing the synchronization with the world core hastily was to cut Typhon's link with it. What? Thanatos ignored Typhon's confusion and glanced at the device strapped to his wrist. It's a message from Gaia. Looks like she has cut your link with the world's core. Panic surged through Typhon's branches. No, Typhon roared. I've gained resistance to death itself after decades of your relentless tyranny. You cannot. Thanatos placed his palm the tree's trunk. Darkness. The true darkness hidden with Thanatos, shadow bloomed. Devour. Black ink-like tendrils erupted and crawled up Typhon's trunk with terrifying speed. Typhon's desperate attempts to resist were useless. Monstrous creatures spawned from its bark. They tried to attack Thanatos, but the darkness swallowed them all like a tsunami. As the inky tendrils climbed higher, Typhon let out a hysterical, grating laugh. It's all, according to the memories. It screeched in a voice filled with manic glee. I saw it in the child of Mana's mind. I knew I would lose. It didn't matter if you were here or not. I could never win. The memories showed me my future. Typhon's voice, filled with a mix of anguish and triumph, echoed. But you won't win either. I've made sure you can't win. The father laughed. Its intent was filled with unshakable confidence. I did it long ago. Now, there is no way you can win. At Nobleman at. You will die. Thanatos' expression hardened. The darkness finished devouring the tree, letting out a deep, almost human-like burp before retreating into Thanatos' shadow. A series of notifications flashed. Agility +1. Strength +1. Mental resistance +1. Right-hand magic circuit +1. Partial memories acquired. I gained a whole lot of nothing. Thanatos shook his head in disappointment. Despite Typhon's overwhelming strength, the disparity between them had been immense. Well, let's check the memories. A sharp pain tore through Thanatos' head as he attempted to access the fragments of Typhon's mind and was rejected. A spiritual barrier, thick and impenetrable, blocked him. He gritted his teeth, forcing his will against it. His expression grew strained. Finally he shattered the seal. Damn it, he muttered as he saw the memories. The seal was there to buy time. The memories were gone. Destroyed. Typhon had left behind a spiritual parasite that consumed the memories the moment Neo killed him. Worse, the parasite turned its focus on Thanatos, attempting to invade his mind after eating Typhon's memories. Don't overestimate yourself. Thanatos obliterated the parasite with a single thought. After ensuring it was truly dead, he opened his quest window. Time remaining until world's end. 19 hours, 37 minutes, 46 seconds. His jaw tightened. The world would end in 20 hours. Despite all their efforts, the countdown hadn't slowed. Thanatos had meticulously covered every possible threat. Zeus was convincing the moon to remain in orbit. Thanatos had dealt with Typhon. Gaia was calming the world core. The Titans were sealing the Bermuda Triangle. Ares and Athena were purging the 5 emperors. No matter what we do, the countdown still goes on, Thanatos muttered, frustration evident in his voice. Suddenly, he froze. A ripple of distortion in the air caught his attention. His eyes darted upward. Thanatos, get back. Emma's voice rang out. She was sprinting toward him with a panicked expression. The air above them shattered like glass, revealing a massive sphere of compressed energy. The sheer density of it made the space around it shimmer unnaturally. Thanatos. Face twisted. That thing looks like it could put a hole in Ireland's map. The sphere had been hidden within a subspace maintained by Typhon. With Typhon's death, the subspace collapsed, and the deadly energy ball was unleashed. As if on cue, the sphere detonated, releasing an explosion of catastrophic magnitude. Thanatos, standing closest, had no time to dodge. Even if he'd been farther away, escape from its massive range would have been impossible. Damn it, he muttered as the searing heat began to melt his body. I should have given some defensive intent to this body. B6, Basement, Awakener Association Headquarters, New Turkey. Neo was in deep meditation. Suddenly, his brows twitched. His eyes snapped open and a spark of irritation flashed within them. That bastard Typhon left behind a nasty gift, he said. A cold metal of a coffee can touched his neck and he heard a familiar voice. Here, take this, Gaia said casually, placing the coffee can next to him before sitting across from him. Neo glanced at her. He frowned as his eyes swept over Gaia, who was lounging comfortably in a baggy shirt that barely reached her thighs and wore nothing else. You can wear something proper when I come here, he said. I'll wear whatever I want in my house. Gaia scratched her belly with a yawn. Neo shook his head. The esteemed Gaia, the paragon of elegance and composure to the outside world, was a completely different person in the privacy of her home. Anyway, Gaia said, flopping down onto the couch with a slight bounce, what happened with Typhon? My intent defeated him, Neo replied. But the monster had left behind a powerful bomb. Were there casualties? She asked with slight furrowed brows. No, Neo assured her. I sacrificed my intent to absorb the explosion. He had used Thanatos, his intent, clone, to devour the explosion with its darkness. However, the intent had overexerted itself and perished as a result. I still don't understand how that technique works. How can you create physical, tangible bodies with intent? Only Zeus and Athena can use intent, and even they can use it just for telepathy. It was a huge praise coming from Gaia, who was responsible for creating almost all techniques used by association. Even she was not able to comprehend the mechanism behind intent. Neo's eyes lit up as if he'd been waiting for this question. Gaia froze mid-sip of her coffee, realizing her mistake. Oh no, she muttered, already regretting her curiosity. Read exclusive adventures at Empire. Neo leaned forward. The air demeanor shifted into that of an enthusiastic teacher. It's normal. After all, I've created this technique myself. You see, Gaia, it's all about intent compression and manipulation. Normally, we funnel pure willpower into a specific form which creates intent and fill them with thoughts. But if you fill the intent with techniques instead of normal thoughts. Stop. Stop right there. Gaia held up a hand in a borderline pleading tone. I'm too tired for one of your lectures right now. But, no buts, she cut him off, sinking deeper into the couch. Just tell me, have you managed to break the barrier separating our world and Underworld? Not yet. He clicked his tongue when her words reminded of his current predicament. No matter what I do, I can't go to the Underworld anymore. He looked around, noticing dead souls only he could see. It's not just me. No one can enter Underworld. Dead souls, spiritual monsters, and Grim Reapers too, he muttered while holding the black badge in his hands. C279 True Despair 1. Even Grim Reapers can't? Gaia asked. No. Neo looked at the black badge in his hand with complicated gaze. The badge had a scythe emblem on the front, while his name, Thanatos, was etched on the back in an ancient language. Since he had decided to hide the fact that he was from the future, following Barbados' warning, Neo needed an alias. Back then, Gaia had suggested the name, Thanatos. Though he had initially found the name exaggerated, he still did. Circumstances forced him to adopt it, and it stuck. Neo shook his head again, recalling the embarrassment he felt when choosing Thanatos as his pseudonym. This badge is given to all Grim Reapers, Neo explained to Gaia. I got it when I became a Grim Reaper a few months ago. With this, any Grim Reaper can travel freely between the world of the living and the Underworld, provided they have a valid reason. The reasons typically included hunting down spiritual monsters that had escaped from the Underworld or capturing ghosts that lingered in the world of living. Unlike most Grim Reapers, Neo had the privilege of unrestricted travel between the two realms. He didn't need to submit explanations to the higher-ups to use the teleportation arrays. For a time, it had been amazing. Neo could finally leave the Forest of All Beginnings, cross the Blood Sea, and meet others, especially his father. But then, everything changed. Suddenly, Neo could no longer enter the Underworld. His badge had stopped working. Even killing himself to access the Underworld failed. And it wasn't just him. Anyone who died now wandered the earth as ghosts. For reasons unknown to him, the Underworld had closed its gate to all. It's okay. Everything will be fine, Gaia said softly. While Neo was lost in his thoughts, Gaia came closer and hugged him, gently patting his head. Can you stop treating me like a kid? Neo asked, exasperated. I will, when you grow a bit older. I am old. I just don't look like it. Gaia chuckled as she saw Neo frown. She had the urge to pinch his cheek but knew it would only irritate him further. When will Beelzebub return? Gaia asked, changing the topic. I've received messages about a giant worm appearing at the Savage Expanse. Looks like he performed spectacularly today. Quote. I don't know. What? I don't know where that damned bastard is, Neo admitted with a sigh. Beelzebub, another grand name bestowed by Gaia, gained the ability to transform into a massive worm after Neo achieved adept mastery in time. Over the years, Beelzebub had grown larger and larger. And older. Puberty hit him hard, and eventually, he rebelled. The last time Neo saw Beelzebub was 23 years ago. Before leaving, Beelzebub had called Neo an asshole, because his ability to eat had been limited to mimic shadow elementals, thanks to Neo's stay in the shadow world. He left, declaring he wouldn't return until Neo offered him something better to consume. I think you're misunderstanding something, Neo told Gaia. I didn't call Beelzebub to help me. He came on his own and did it just to steal my glory for defeating Typhon. Beelzebub had left immediately after devouring the Savage Expanse. Consuming such a vast amount of shadow elementals had disgusted him. Otherwise, Neo was certain Beelzebub would have devoured Typhon's core as well. Quote. Gaia was left speechless. Finally, she chuckled and said, you two are like a father and son. Stick to one thing. Call me a kid or a father, Neo said, rolling his eyes. Anyway, did you get what I asked for? He asked. Yes. It should be delivered any moment now, at Nobleman at. As if on cue, the door opened, and a robot carrying a large parcel entered. It placed the parcel on the table and left. Perfect timing, Gaia said, opening the parcel. Inside was a cube made of glass. Suspended within the cube was a golden stone, rhythmically pulsing like a heartbeat. Powerful lightning sparks crackled around it. The lightning Keelin's heart, Neo remarked. I didn't think you could get it so quickly. I told you, I have quite a few connections, Gaia replied. Lightning Keelins were elemental beasts originating from the elemental world of lightning. They rarely appeared on Earth. Although Neo would have been fine with the heart of any elemental beast, not just lightning-based ones, he still felt a sense of gratitude. Gaia had gone out of her way to capture a Keelin just because it was his original request. She carefully opened the glass cube. Lightning shot out of the heart, wild and untamed. Gaia suppressed the energy with her mana and handed the heart to Neo. Are you sure you can handle this? She asked. I should be able to, Neo muttered, only half confident. My concept of darkness is true darkness. It should let me gain the affinity of lightning from this, but luck still plays a part. For the past 4 decades, Neo had focused on deepening his elemental masteries rather than increasing his rank. He was proud to say that all his concepts were unique and powerful. The concept of true darkness allowed him to devour anything, unlike ordinary darkness, and make it his own. Talent, element mastery, affinity, traits. Neo could devour everything. Just like how darkness absorbed every color without discrimination and painted them as its own, Neo could now do the same. The only problem was luck. Using darkness is like pulling from a gacha system, Neo thought. I can now roll for premium summons thanks to my concept, and the drop rate has increased by 20%. But the total chance is still only 21%. Neo wanted to cry but had no tears. Taking a deep breath, he devoured the lightning Qilin's heart. Darkness bloomed from his shadow, enveloping and consuming the golden stone. A notification appeared. Mimicked lightning mastery +3/3. Neo sighed deeply. Since this was a shadow world, even the lightning Qilin had been made of mimicked shadow elemental energy. Even though Neo had been lucky enough to acquire the lightning affinity, he couldn't gain it from this heart. Damn it. He had suspected this would happen, but it still made his heart heavy. ... Savage expanse destroyed. Emma stood frozen in shock. One moment, the explosion was about to annihilate everything. The next, Thanatos absorbed it with his darkness and disappeared. He devoured pure energy. She mumbled. How? Shaking off her shock, she regrouped with the other awakeners and helped them calm down. A few minutes later, the sky darkened for a split second. Emma tensed, sensing a presence behind her. Turning around, she saw Jack standing there, silent and unreadable. Sorry for being late, Jack said, surveying the barren wasteland. I rushed as soon as I sensed Typhon waking up, but I was still too far away. It's fine. Typhon was defeated by Thanatos. Thanatos who? Jack asked. It's the name of the Gaia's knight, Emma replied. Continue your saga on Empire. Oh him. Jack nodded with a calm expression. He had heard rumors about an awakener who protected Gaia from the shadows. Emma chewed her lip. Hesitation was clear on her face. After a few seconds of struggle, she finally spoke. I think Thanatos is Neo. Their abilities were similar. I see. Much to Emma's surprise, Jack remained composed. She had expected a more intense reaction. Noticing her confusion, he offered her a faint smile. I've suspected for a while now that Neo was the awakener working with Gaia. Quote. Emma blinked. I'm pretty sure quite a few awakeners have thought the same, Jack added with a knowing look. Emma's cheeks turned red as the implication hit her. Jack's subtle hint was clear. She had been oblivious to something that was practically common knowledge. I'm not stupid. She wanted to yell. Before she could defend herself, the other awakeners nearby began snickering. Boss, looks like you're happy since Sir Erebus is here. One of them teased. You should just propose to him already, boss. Another chimed in. Jack chuckled softly. I guess everyone's feeling relieved now that Typhon's been stopped, he remarked. It was D-Day. The day of judgment. Gaia had warned them that the world would end on D-Day, today. The awakeners had been tense, believing Typhon to be the harbinger of doom. Now that he was defeated, the tension melted away, leaving them relaxed enough to tease their superior. We should regroup at headquarters, Jack suggested. We might have defeated Typhon, but there's still the moon, the Bermuda Triangle, and the 5 emperors. The others might need our help. Jack turned, ready to leave. Before he could take another step, darkness stretched beneath Emma's feet, swallowing both her and Jack into a dome of shadow. What are you doing? Jack asked. His voice was calm but it had an uncertain edge. Something I should have done a long time ago, Emma replied with a firm tone. You know the world is going to end today? She asked. Yes, I do. That's why we are working hard to stop it. To make sure the world doesn't get destroyed, he said with an uneasy expression while backing away. So can you take down these walls? We need to go and help others. You don't need to worry about them. They can handle their tasks. Besides, we are too far to reach their locations on time. While she talked, tendrils of darkness sprang from ground and wrapped around Jack's limb. Miss Emma, what are you doing? Making sure you don't run away like you always do. She stood close to Jack. Year after year, I've been trying to remain, give you space. But you never gave me a proper answer, she said while fiddling with his tie. Quote. Quote. Even my patience has limits. Quote. Quote. Yes or no, she said. I won't take an ambiguous answer today. After all, today might be our last day. So, I need to know. C280 True Despair 2. Jack had a terrible expression on his face. Confronted like this, even he could not keep smiling. Look, I'm not from this timeline. I'll have to leave one day, so. Yes or no? He gritted his teeth, and his jaw tightened visibly. Seeing his struggling expression made Emma's heart flutter strangely. She felt something weird awakening inside her, but she suppressed it. This wasn't the time or place for it. You are my ancestor, Jack finally admitted the truth he had been hiding for decades. The closeness you felt when you saw me was because of our bloodline resonance. You asked why I could use multiple phylacteries like you, right? It's because it's the ability I inherited from. Yes or no? Her voice cut through his confusion like a blade. Emma wasn't stupid enough not to understand Jack had her bloodline after seeing how similar his abilities were to hers. The emotions she felt at first might have been due to bloodline resonance, but everything after was not. She stared into his eyes, seeing the turmoil within, and she decided to push ahead. You know, Jack, she whispered. There are mostly two types of darkness users. The first ones are like me, who have their emotions suppressed. The others are like you. They have chaotic emotions, and they give into their desires easily. It's the second type who are common, and they are the reason why darkness users are seen as evil. Jack struggled to break free from the chains of darkness. His expression faltered when he heard Emma's voice, which sounded like the temptation of a devil. Is she using some kind of spell? He thought, his mind muddled by an unseen force. What are you doing? He asked as his breathing started to turn heavy. Don't worry. It's a spell that lowers others' guards and makes them more honest, she replied. She continued, stepping closer. As I was saying, it's common for darkness users like you to lose control of your emotions, she said. The world is already ending. No one will blame you if you let go of your duties now and indulge in your fantasies. Her voice was alluring, like honey dripping with venom. The same Emma who had been angry at Apollo for skipping his duties was now telling Jack to do the same. However, she couldn't be blamed for it. 40 years. She had been trying to court Jack for 40 years. The damned bastard had not given her a straight answer even once. He neither agreed nor denied her. It was clear he liked her but couldn't say yes. Continue your journey with Empire. That's why Emma, knowing today might be the last day of the world, decided to become a hypocrite and force an answer out of Jack. Wait, Emma, this isn't the time for these things. He spoke in between ragged breaths, his eyes darting nervously. Whatever spell Emma was using made it hard for him to think straight. Her beautiful eyes and red lips were starting to look enticing. He gulped. Jack, isn't it weird? My family name is Cater, but yours is Hanma even though you are my descendant. Why yeah. Jack nodded with a muddled gaze. But if we get together, my family name would become Hanma too. Doesn't that answer the problem? It does. He answered, confused. It does, she nodded, as a soft smirk tugged at her lips. Jack held her shoulders, using her as support, and opened his mouth. You sound right, he spoke slowly. Maybe it should be okay. Knowing what Jack would say, Emma didn't wait any longer. She pulled him down by his tie and locked lips with him. B6, Basement, Awakener Association Headquarters, New Turkey. Neo felt a chill crawl up his spine. At Nobleman at. He looked around with furrowed brows. What's wrong? Gaia asked. Nothing. I just felt disgusted. For a second. Quote ellipsis question mark quote. While the two were talking, the metallic door hissed open, and Kronos entered. He moved with a deliberate slowness. Exhaustion was clear on his face. Without a word, he sat next to Neo and massaged his brows. The tension was visible in the lines of his face. Since you're here, I guess the Titans were successful in closing the portals in the Bermuda Triangle. Gaia asked, her tone clipped and professional. Before Neo knew, she was wearing a formal attire. Yes, we were successful. Only barely though, Kronos replied, his voice heavy with fatigue. How are the preparations for the world time spell? She questioned. I've run the final check. It should work as intended. The world time spell had to be upgraded 20 years ago due to foundational complications. Other than the two giant magic circles on the north and south poles, a new magic circle had been drawn in the space of a line running over the equator. If today they failed to save the world, they would activate the World Time Project and send all the top-ranked awakeners into the past. It was a desperate and risky project that could earn them the wrath of time and fate. But they had no other choice. Only 18 hours are left, Neo muttered. He stood up and left the room. I'll meditate a bit. You two should get your battle gears ready too. We might have to join battles suddenly. Currently, they had no idea how the world would be destroyed. Neo knew the Angel of the Outers would attack. But from where would it strike? Nothing had entered the solar system yet. It didn't seem like they would come from space. Spatial gates. There was no wormhole about to be formed on Earth. No matter how much they searched, they couldn't find an answer. Damn it. Neo clicked his tongue and entered the first basement floor. He stepped into the third door to the stairs. His surroundings changed instantly, replaced by an ethereal realm filled with clouds that glowed faintly in the dim light. A soft, dreamlike haze enveloped the area. Countless people were sleeping inside those clouds. Their expressions were peaceful yet hauntingly still. They were dreaming. I guess you're still alive, Neo said with a smirk as he stood beside the sleeping Cain. And here you were thinking you would die soon. Anomaly number 79 had been a headache. It still was. For the first 9 months, it kept appearing daily, and every time it did, its strength and numbers increased sharply. From the 10th month to the 12th month, it appeared once a week, and its numbers and strength increased tremendously each time. After the 12th month, it appeared once a month. After the 5th year, it appeared once a year. After the 20th year, it appeared once a decade. Each time it came back, its strength and numbers had a significant increase. According to Gaia's analysis, the delay in appearance was due to the preparation time the anomaly number 79 needed. It couldn't gather minions endlessly and make them stronger without limits. Isn't it surprising, Cain? Neo muttered. Back when we first encountered anomaly number 79, everyone feared it. But now, no one even bats an eye. He paced slowly around the sleeping figure. His steps made no sound on the ethereal floor. These days, the association provides complete protection against anomaly number 79. It's become one of the easiest anomalies to deal with. They're even considering removing its name from the official list of anomalies. C281 True Despair 3. Cain, trapped within eternal dreams, showed no reaction to Neo's words. His peaceful expression was a painful reminder of Neo's past mistakes. Neo clenched his fists. His jaw tightened as he stared down at Cain's still form. If only I had created my concept faster, I could have placed you into a deep sleep, not this dream, from which you can never wake up. The regret in his voice lingered in the air. After a few more words to the silent Cain, Neo felt his heart lighten slightly. He turned and left the room. The soft mist swirled behind him as the door closed. Neo stepped into the shadows and disappeared, hiding his presence. Shadow movement spell allowed him to roam the association headquarters uninhibited. The scale of the headquarters had grown tremendously over the years. Towering spires stretched high above, connected by shimmering bridges. Inside, countless people moved with purpose, their voices blending into a constant hum of urgency. Time remaining until the world's end. 8 hours, 17 minutes, 59 seconds. Ares and Athena returned with their team. Their arrival was marked by triumphant cheers. They had been successful in defeating the 5 emperors. A festive atmosphere swept through the association as news spread that 3 of the 4 calamities had been successfully diverted. Typhon, Bermuda Triangle, the 5 emperors, and the moon. They were the 4 calamities that could bring about the world's end, or worse, summon the Angel of the Outers to Earth. Neo watched from the shadows with an unreadable expression before he turned around and left. Time remaining until the world's end. 2 hours, 38 minutes, 19 seconds. Neo stood alone on the rooftop. The night sky stretching endlessly above him. Stars shimmered like distant memories, and a cold breeze carried the faint sounds of revelry from below. The door creaked open, and Gaia entered, her steps unsteady. She carried a half-empty bottle of alcohol and leaned heavily against Neo's shoulder, her cheeks flushed from the effects of the drink. There's good news, she said with a lopsided grin. Zeus was successful in his negotiations with the moon. Neo raised an eyebrow but didn't reply. Gaia slouched further, almost collapsing against him. Her drunken state made her words slur and her usual sharpness was dulled. We did it, she mumbled, a soft hiccup escaping her lips. We stopped all 4 calamities. She tried to raise her bottle in a mock toast, but Neo sighed and summoned shadow monsters to act as a chair for her. The dark forms coalesced beneath her, gently holding her up. What are you doing? Come, drink with me, Tilda, she teased, waving the bottle in his direction. Neo ignored her and took the documents she clutched in her other hand. His eyes scanned the pages, which detailed Zeus's deal with the moon. The moon had demanded human settlers, 80% of them female, to populate its surface. The request was bizarre, almost laughable, but it was part of the agreement. Neo. Gaia tugged at his shirt, trying to frown but failing to hide the giggle bubbling up. Let's party, Tilda. Gaia. Neo's voice was cold, but his trembling eyes betrayed the emotions he was trying to hide. Are you giving up too? Gaia froze, her drunken cheer fading slightly as she met his gaze. To Neo, it was painfully clear, the world's end had not been stopped. The timer was still ticking. Time remaining until the world's end. 2 hours, 37 minutes, 42 seconds. It's clear now that the four calamities won't be responsible for summoning the Angel of the Outers, Neo said. We need to redirect our focus too. I know. Gaia's voice was clear, free of the drunken slur she had maintained moments before. Her act dissolved for an instant, revealing a sharp clarity. Then, just as quickly, she resumed her playful drunken demeanor. But we did our best, Tilda. It's not like we can do anything now, so might as well enjoy ourselves, Tilda. She took another swig from the bottle and laughed softly. Time remaining until world's end. 5 minutes, 23 seconds. Neo stood motionless with an unreadable gaze. His eyes were fixed on the starry sky. Their cold light mirrored in his own distant gaze. The chill of the wind brushed against his skin, but he remained still, leaning against the rooftop fence. If only I could ask Father for help, he thought bitterly. The memory of his failed attempt to reach Hades surfaced. He had planned to request the Lord of the Underworld's intervention if all else failed. But he didn't even have a chance to ask for an audience. The Underworld had been sealed before he could leave the Forest of All Beginning and enter the place where Grim Reapers and his father lived. Time remaining until world's end. 49 seconds. He, you're quite like Zeus, you know. Gaia's voice broke through his thoughts. Neo didn't turn. His focus remained on the night sky. Using his inattention, Gaia crept closer and her cold fingers brushed his cheek. Her playful tone faded, knowing Neo wouldn't drink no matter what she did. Dropping her pretense entirely, she spoke with her usual calm, serious voice. Zeus thinks the attack will come from space. That's why he's still on the moon. Neo let out a resigned sigh. His breath formed a faint mist in the cold air. As expected, he murmured, there was a reason he insisted on handling the moon himself. Gaia nodded, stepping beside him. Her expression remained unreadable. He hasn't given up. He's planning to intercept the Angel of the Outers in space, before it reaches Earth. He can't do it alone. Neo's voice was firm. At nobleman at. Zeus thought the Angel of Outer would come from space. That's why he was there. I told him the same, Gaia replied. But he said he'd do it, even if it cost him his life. Neo's grip on the parapet tightened. His knuckles whitened under the strain. Zeus's arrogance was unparalleled, but so was his determination. He was consumed by guilt. A guilt he masked with bravado and unrelenting strength. He lashed out at anyone who dared mention his sister's role in the apocalypse. But although he didn't show it, the reason he was obsessed with saving the world was to make sure no one criticized his sister anymore. And now, he stood alone on the moon, the Earth's first and perhaps the last line of defense. Time remaining until world's end. 10 seconds. Neo glanced at the countdown with a calm gaze. 9 seconds. The stars above remained serene, oblivious to the turmoil on the ground. 6 seconds. The wind howled, carrying distant cheers and laughter from those indulging in their final moments. 4 seconds. Neo exhaled slowly, centering his senses. 3 seconds. Gaia stood quietly beside him. Her expression a mixture of hope and dread. 2 seconds. Neo's shadow flickered unnaturally, as if reacting to his rising tension. 1 second. A single breath filled the silence. Countdown finished. Neo expanded his senses, scanning the surroundings for any shift, any ripple in the world that signaled their doom. His perception stretched far and wide. But nothing happened. The stars continued their tranquil dance across the sky. The wind still swept through his coat. The association members below carried on with their revelries. Nothing changed, Gaia whispered, breaking the silence. Their eyes met, both filled with cautious uncertainty. Maybe D-Day really stopped, she spoke hesitatingly. Because we defeated the four calamities. Neo didn't respond immediately. C282 True Despair 4. Maybe you are right, Neo spoke after a few seconds. His voice carried a faint note of unease. He closed his eyes and tried to sense any change in the surroundings. The rooftop was eerily quiet, save for the distant rustling of leaves and the faint hum of city noise far below. Minutes passed, and nothing happened. Just as he was about to let out a sigh of relief, Gaia coughed. Her coughs grew violent. She doubled over, and blood spilled from her lips as grabbed Neo's hand with a trembling grip. Neo. Her eyes were bloodshot. She kept opening and closing her mouth, as if trying to say something, but unable to do so due to the coughing. Before Neo could react, her eyes went wide with panic, and her body slumped forward as she lost consciousness. There was no time to rest. The air grew heavy, and Neo felt an unnatural shift in the world around him. A cold shiver ran down his spine as his instincts screamed that something was terribly wrong. The divine energy disappeared from the air. Neo muttered, his voice barely audible. The rooftop doors burst open with a deafening crash, splinters of wood scattering across the floor. Kronos stormed in. There is bad news. None of us can use mana anymore. Kronos exclaimed. We can't use any ability without mana. His words faltered as his gaze fell on Gaia. His eyes widened in shock as he crouched beside her. His hands moved swiftly to check her pulse. Before long, his brows creased and his face hardened. It's just as I thought, Kronos said gravely. Something happened to the world core. What do you mean by that? Neo asked. He glanced around, sensing the commotion below. Inside the building, the Awakeners were panicking. The disappearance of mana had rendered their abilities useless, and confusion spread like wildfire. For reasons Neo couldn't understand, he could still sense the divine energy within himself. He hadn't lost his divine energy like others. The world core is responsible for creating ambient mana. Since the mana has disappeared, it means something happened to the world core, Kronos explained with a heavy tone. Gaia is connected to the world much deeper than any of us. The damage to the world core must have been transferred to her too. As the two talked, faint purple cracks began to spiderweb across Gaia's pale skin, emitting a faint, ominous glow. Beelzebub, Neo called telepathically, his mind's voice urgent. Come back here, quick. The caterpillar spirit, startled to hear Neo's voice after years of silence, hesitated briefly before sensing the urgency in his tone. It abandoned the notion of protest and rushed toward Neo's location. What is this? Kronos muttered. His brows furrowed as he noticed the cracks spreading across Gaia's body. He carefully lifted her into his arms. We need to get her to the healers, Kronos said. Without mana, he couldn't use his time affinity to halt Gaia's injury or regress her condition. The two rushed into the headquarters. Their footsteps echoed through the halls. The air inside was charged with tension as the Awakeners, though initially thrown into chaos, began regaining their composure. Veterans of countless battles, they understood the importance of staying calm in a crisis. When they saw Kronos and Neo enter, murmurs rippled through the gathered crowd. Is that Kronos? And who is that with him? What are they doing inside the association? Ignoring the curious whispers, the duo entered the medical wing. Kronos gently placed Gaia on a bed. The doctors worked swiftly. However, no matter what they tried, they could neither determine the cause of Gaia's condition nor devise a treatment. Ares and Athena arrived soon after. Their expressions turned grim as their eyes fell on Gaia's fragile state. The dim light of the medical room mirrored the deep concern inside their hearts. Hours later, the highest-ranked Awakeners present within the association headquarters convened in an emergency meeting. The tension in the room was palpable, thick as a storm cloud. Many of them exchanged uneasy glances when they noticed Neo among them. His presence both a surprise and a mystery. However, they kept their doubts to themselves, knowing this wasn't the time for such questions. The meeting stretched on for hours as Kronos outlined the situation to the grim-faced assembly. The summary was short and direct. Mana had vanished from Earth a few hours ago. Gaia had lost consciousness at the exact same moment. The group swiftly agreed on an emergency evacuation. Citizens were to be relocated into fortified bunkers designed for worst-case scenarios. The bunkers are useless. No place is safe if the world is getting destroyed. Everyone in the room shared the same grim thought, but no one dared voice it aloud. Exactly one day later, Neo sensed Beelzebub's arrival. The air around the headquarters was heavy with foreboding as Neo stepped outside to meet him. The sky was overcast, a pale gray that seemed to reflect the growing unease of the world. Far in the distance, the ground began to tremble violently before caving in on itself. With an earth-shattering roar, a massive worm erupted from the ground, its segmented body glistening with an otherworldly sheen. The creature twisted in the air before shrinking. Its colossal form collapsed and transformed into a tiny caterpillar no larger than a pinky finger. Beelzebub landed gently on Neo's outstretched palm. Thanks for coming back on such short notice, Neo said, his voice soft but grateful. He rubbed the top of Beelzebub's head in a gesture of praise. The caterpillar let out a small, playful groan, though it had initially planned to act annoyed. The affection melted its pretense, and it squirmed happily in Neo's hand. Neo's expression turned serious as he quickly shifted the conversation to business. At Nobleman at. We're going to the North Pole, he announced. Q. Beelzebub tilted its tiny head. The world time spell can't be activated since mana has disappeared. But I can still use my divine energy. So, Neo believed he could activate the world time spell. Theoretically at least. Practically, the energy required to cast a spell capable of sending dozens of people 30 to 50 years into the past was not something he possessed. C283 True Despair 5. It was a problem he would confront when the time came. Neo activated his shadow movement spell without further delay. He removed his bloodline debuff and activated his blessing. His speed increased exponentially, and in the blink of an eye, he began his journey northward, cutting through the desolate landscape with swift speed. Half a day later, Neo was forced to stop when the entire world shook violently. The ground beneath his feet fractured with deafening cracks. Oceans churned and boiled, releasing thick plumes of steam, while the frigid air grew sharp and bitter, freezing everything in its path. An ancient cry tore through the air, echoing across the globe. The sound carried a power that seemed to shake the very foundations of the continents. Far beneath the Atlantic Ocean, the seafloor buckled and split open, creating an enormous chasm. A colossal bone dragon, larger than the mountains, emerged from its depths of the chasm. The dragon's skeletal form radiated an oppressive aura. It swam upward, breaching the ocean's surface with a thunderous roar that sent shockwaves rippling across the seas. In one swift motion, it soared into the sky, spreading its cracked, broken wings. The creature's bellow shook the world and shattered mountains. Despite its injuries, broken wings, a missing leg, and a partially crushed skull, it exuded an aura of overwhelming menace and power. The ancient bone dragon, Veldora, extended his senses across the globe. His perception was vast and unrelenting, brushing over every living being on Earth like a suffocating wave. The awakeners froze in place, paralyzed by fear. Weaker ones collapsed to the ground. Their bodies trembled as they felt the dragon's gaze pierce their very souls. Then, as quickly as it had come, the oppressive feeling disappeared when Veldora retracted its aura. Having located his target, Veldora flapped his tattered wings, sending powerful gusts rippling through the air, and flew straight toward Neo. Neo, who had already sensed Veldora's approach, stood motionless. He frowned, not out of fear but due to the arrival of Veldoras on Earth. At Nobleman at. Veldora was the guardian of the forest of all beginnings in the Underworld. He wouldn't leave his location unless it was absolutely necessary, not to mention coming to the world of living wasn't something Veldora was allowed to do. It didn't take long before the dragon appeared on the horizon. Neo saw Veldora, who seemed to cover the sky every time he opened his wings. The giant dragon was flying towards Neo when suddenly its injured wings broke completely, and it crashed. Neo's eyes widened. He rushed towards Veldora. Veldora, what happened to you? As he neared the giant dragon, he noticed purple cracks on its bones. Why, young master? Veldora's voice was like an old tree. Ancient, but filled with wisdom. He tried to raise his broken body and bow before Neo. Stop it. Don't force yourself, Neo said. The giant dragon chuckled. I can't not give a proper greeting to the child of Monarch. He lifted his upper body with his single front leg and lowered his head. I'm happy to see you in health, O great child of Monarch. Veldora was one of the few people in the Underworld who knew Neo was Thanatos and that he was from the future. Before Neo could ask why he had come to the world of the living, Veldora dropped shocking news. The Underworld has fallen, and the Monarch has been slain. Quote. Neo's mind blanked. He couldn't process the meaning of Veldora's words. The god of the Underworld, the monarch who had looked over the afterlife since ancient times, had fallen. Veldora chuckled despairingly. I'm sorry. He lowered his head further. We couldn't protect the monarch. I came here to warn you of the incoming danger. Hades had sealed the Underworld to make sure they couldn't come to the world of the living. No, that was only a half-truth. The real reason the Underworld had been sealed was to protect Neo. Hades and the Grim Reapers didn't want Neo to participate in a battle that could endanger him. But they had lost. Disgustingly easily at that. I'm sorry, Veldora repeated his words again, his voice choking. The sole reason for my existence was to protect you. But I am leaving before you. It was as if Neo could see the tears flowing down the bone dragon's face. Regret was clear in his voice. Please, stay alive, young master. Veldora crumbled into dust before Neo's eyes. It wasn't just his body that was destroyed. His soul and his seed of existence, the core of one's existence, disappeared too. Veldora had died a true death. Having his seed of existence erased, he couldn't be revived, not even by Hades. Veldora was completely erased, Neo thought mechanically with a blank face. He knew who were capable of such feat. As if on cue, the world shook again. Giant pillars, as wide as cities, sprang from the ground all over the globe. They emitted a nauseating presence. Their purple surface looked like a mesh of decayed flesh of unrecognizable monsters. The pillars shook. They let out an ear-piercing noise, and suddenly hundreds of eyes opened on their surfaces. The eyes looked around erratically. Neo felt as if his eyes were set on fire when he met the gaze of one of the eyes on the pillar near him. Blood began to leak from his eyes and a sharp pain stabbed into his head. The air around him grew heavy and oppressive, filled with a thick, nauseating stench that seemed to cling to his skin. The once vibrant skies turned into a swirling mass of dark purple clouds, flashing ominous lightning. The void corrupts you. His skin began to crack, and his seed of existence trembled. The ground beneath him fractured, leaking an eerie violet light. Neo sensed the living presences around him die helplessly. Cries of help entered his ears. But before he could move, those living presences were snuffed out with no hopes of revival. A simple gaze from the pillars killed them. The mental attacks caused the living beings to explode, or the corruption from the gazes erased them. The void corrupts you. The eyes on the pillar nearest to Neo turned to him after killing everyone around him. Under their focused gazes, the pain attacking Neo's mind increased severalfolds. C284 True Despair, 6. His mind started to become muddled and blood came out of his nose. But that was all. The mental attacks were far from capable of killing Neo. He withstood them with sheer will. The towering, grotesque pillar trembled violently as if angered by Neo's defiance. It began to shed chunks of decayed flesh-like material. Thousands of mouths opened on its surface, releasing a deafening cacophony. They puked countless maggots which advanced towards Neo, eating everything in their path. The terrain they devoured turned into lifeless dust, leaving behind barren, ash-colored scars on the earth. While Neo was busy concentrating and fending off the mental attacks, Beelzebub came out of his pocket to protect Neo. He started to devour time. His actions caused the maggots to freeze midair, and it bought Neo much-needed time. Neo bit his lips, hoping to use the pain to clear his mind. He could withstand the mental attacks and corruption of the void thanks to his eternal skill and his experience with the maggots in the fourth vision of Sphinx. However, the body he inhabited in the fourth vision was much stronger, unlike his current one, thus it took him time to shake off the mental attack from the Angel of Outers. The void corrupts you. The pain tearing through Neo's mind increased, but now he could move. He clenched his teeth and turned around, rushing towards the North Pole. The void corrupts you. Purple cracks began to appear on Neo's skin, much like the ground and the objects around him. The cracks emitted a faint, sickly glow that pulsed rhythmically, as if alive. Before the cracks could spread to the rest of his body, he slashed and cut away the corrupted parts. He triggered the partial third stage blessing and regenerated his wounds. The maggots appeared on his path wherever he turned. Their writhing, grotesque bodies squirmed relentlessly, emitting a faint, wet sound that made his stomach churn. He slashed at them, but his attacks did no damage. The best he could do was push away the maggots to clear a path. The void corrupts you. Ellipsis. Association Headquarters, Turkey. Dark clouds loomed heavily over the sky, casting an ominous shadow over the landscape. 5 grotesque pillars of fleshy mass surrounded the association building. Their surfaces pulsated as if they were alive. Quite a few awakeners had their heads burst open due to the powerful mental attacks. Several dozen more were writhing in agony. Purple cracks spread across their skin like a deadly plague. Inside the headquarters, Ares and Athena worked tirelessly. The holy aura emanating from them shone dimly. 2 awakeners tried their best to alleviate the pain of the injured awakeners. Although they couldn't use mana, their concepts still worked. Ad novelben ad. After all, concepts could manipulate the laws of the world. However, the absence of mana severely weakened the power of a concept. Even with their efforts, they could hardly heal anyone. Outside, the flesh pillars heaved unnervingly and began spewing forth maggots. The maggots varied greatly in size, some no bigger than a fingernail, while others were as large as skyscrapers. They consumed everything in their path, leaving behind trails of devastation. Ares tightened his grip on his greatsword. Athena, keep healing everyone. I'll stop those things, he commanded firmly. But, we are the only ones who can fight, but we need to leave someone behind to heal the injured. Ares' tone left no room for argument. Most awakeners had focused on upgrading their traits rather than mastering their elements. Even fewer progressed far enough to form a concept, since it was harder than upgrading trait ranks. Ares stepped toward the main doors of the headquarters with heavy, but firm steps. He noticed dozens of awakeners gathered near the entrance. Their expressions were a mix of fear and hesitation. What is happening here? He asked. Sir Ares. One of the awakeners began hesitantly before pointing to someone standing far outside the building. He ordered us to remain inside the building. Following their gaze, Ares spotted Neo, standing resolutely far outside the headquarters. Ares' eyes widened in surprise. Why is he still here? We need him to go to the North Pole. Before Ares could take another step, a voice resonated directly inside his head. I'm not Neo. I'm Thanatos, his intent clone he left behind to protect the association headquarters. Ares frowned. Telepathy. Yes, Thanatos confirmed through the same mental link. Ares scrutinized the figure carefully, trying to confirm if it was truly Neo. He didn't stop walking. Thanatos' voice echoed again in his mind. I've been given permission to stop anyone who tries to act foolishly and leave the building. I can help you in the battle, Ares replied through his thoughts. Please do that after this body dies, Thanatos said curtly, cutting off further argument. Until then, my job is to protect you, not ask for your help. The darkness beneath Thanatos stretched ominously, enveloping the entire association building. It solidified into a protective barrier of shadows, trapping everyone safely inside. Thanatos turned around. He faced the encroaching sea of maggots. As Neo's intent clone, Thanatos could either be controlled directly by Neo or act independently within predetermined commands. Currently, he had been ordered to protect everyone until Neo activated the world time spell. The maggots, now covering half the distance, devoured everything in their way. Thanatos began weaving complex hand signs, and chanted a spell under his breath. Two massive magic circles materialized on either side of him, glowing with an eerie light. From them two SSS-rank shadow summons emerged. The first was a towering humanoid figure with a charcoal black body and the head of a dog. The second resembled a massive lion with wings and a snake for a tail. Both summons exuded a menacing presence as they stood ready for battle. Stop those things, Thanatos commanded. The lion-shaped shadow summon roared fiercely before leaping into the sea of maggots, attacking with brutal ferocity. The humanoid summon raised its arms. It conjured massive tornadoes that pulled the maggots into their swirling depths. Despite the summons, best efforts, Thanatos' eyes darkened. It's not working, he thought grimly. The lion-shaped shadow summon was overwhelmed and destroyed within seconds. Meanwhile, the tornadoes only temporarily halted the maggots' advance and failed to inflict any lasting damage. Thanatos had expected it. Even though the shadow summons were as powerful as SSS-ranked awakeners, he knew they were not strong enough to harm the maggots. C-285 last stand. Their only job was to buy time. Please hurry, Neo. I can't hold these things for too long. The battlefield became chaotic as the tornadoes tore across the land and maggots consumed everything in their path. The air was heavy with the stench of decay, and the flesh pillars continued to puke maggots. Thanatos' expression was far from good. An intent clone was formed by fusing powerful intent with complex techniques. It had a specific number of techniques stored inside it, functioning as its ammunition. At Novelban at. Once an intent clone exhausted its techniques or sustained irreparable damage, it would cease to exist. Thanatos had to use his techniques sparingly if he wanted to last for a long time. Suddenly, purple cracks started to spread across the shadow summons' bodies. The unblinking eyes on the pillars locked onto the shadow summons and obliterated them. Two SSS-ranked shadow summons were eliminated in seconds. If it had been a few decades ago, those two shadows could have conquered the world. But before the angel of an outer god, they were no stronger than insects. Thanatos gripped his sword tightly. Red lightning crackled around him, illuminating the battlefield, and the sky turned darker. He summoned black tornadoes, formed from mimicked air elementals, raged across the land, temporarily stopping the maggots in their path. Thanatos entered the fray. He slashed at the maggots and unleashed large-scale attacks. However, His efforts inflicted no damage. As the battle dragged on, purple cracks began to creep across Thanatos' own body. Unlike Neo, he lacked the ability to heal. The physical strength and blessings that Neo wielded could not be stored within an intent clone. Thanatos had weak defenses due to being an intent clone. Those defenses were weakened further at the moment as Neo had divided Thanatos into two intent clones, sending one to rescue Jack and Emma while the other protected Association headquarters. The pillars trembled again as if enraged, noticing Thanatos' continued resistance. Instantly, the spread of purple cracks on Thanatos' body accelerated. His leg exploded in a burst of dark mist. The sudden loss of his limb caused him to lose balance, and the maggots capitalized on the opportunity. A particularly massive one lunged at him. Its gaping maw aimed to tear apart his upper body. Thanatos was too late to react. At the last second, Kronos appeared beside him, and grabbed his arm. In a blink, the two teleported away to a safer distance. "Why are you outside?" Thanatos asked calmly, leaning on his sword like a crutch. "To help you," Kronos replied. He had used his concept of space element to teleport himself and Ares outside the Association building. "Let me look at your injury," Ares said, stepping closer. "It's fine," Thanatos interrupted. "This body has physical matter, but it is not a living body. It can't be healed with holy or life elements." "Then let me do it," Kronos said firmly. He activated his concept of time element, reversing the flow of time on Thanatos' injury. The destroyed limb reformed as though it had never been damaged. "See, we can help." "There's no need to." A maggot launched a surprise attack before Kronos could finish his sentence. Its enormous jaws clamped down, biting away Kronos' entire body in an instant. What remained of Kronos' corpse fell lifelessly to the side. Thanatos' gaze shifted sharply. Ares was supposed to be covering them while Kronos healed him, but he died too. Ares was killed before he could warn them. There was no time to mourn. The maggots closed in from all sides. Their grotesque forms continued to writhe and shift. Knowing they couldn't breach the building filled with humans until they eliminated Thanatos, they attacked him without a break. Ellipsis. Savage expanse destroyed. Jack's grip on his twin swords tightened as he scanned the approaching swarm of maggots. Just looking at their grotesque forms caused him a headache. Emma stood next to him. She summoned a staff that seemed to glow with a pulsing shadowy aura. The sky above them was shrouded in darkness. "Stick to the plan," Jack said, his voice sharp and steady. "I'll handle the larger ones. Keep them off me," Emma said after she nodded. The maggots surged forward like a relentless tide. At the same time, Jack's shadow bloomed. His legion of undead crawled out from the depths of the shadow's darkness. Tens of thousands of skeleton soldiers, skeleton mages, Dullahans, several bone dragons, and thousands of other undead type of monsters stood behind him. "Attack!" Jack shouted. His legion moved at his command like a well-trained army. They clashed with the maggots. Following them, the awakeners who had come to subjugate Typhon roared and rushed ahead. They clashed with the maggots. Jack wasted no time. He dashed into the battlefield. His silver sword's cut moved with ruthless efficiency. His face happened when he realized his attacks were doing no damage. "This isn't doing anything. Let me try." Emma raised her staff, using her concept to command the darkness elementals. Veil of despair. The ground beneath the swarm turned pitch black as a shadowy mist rose, swallowing the smaller maggots. While the darkness failed to devour them, it temporarily tied them down and they couldn't continue their advance. The ineffectiveness of attacks took Jack and Emma by surprise. They were overwhelmed by the maggots and had no time to help other awakeners. The awakeners continued their desperate struggle. Blades shattered and arrows bounced harmlessly off the grotesque creatures. The lack of mana had caused their strength to plummet. One by one, they fell, consumed, crushed, or torn apart. Screams filled the air, quickly silenced by the relentless swarm. Jack's sharp eyes caught sight of the two awakeners, both twins, about to be eaten by a giant maggot near him. He dashed forward without hesitation. "Get back!" he roared, slashing at the maggot. His strike pushed the grotesque creature back. One of the twins Jack rescued tumbled. Jack planted himself between her and the monster. He summoned a shield made of darkness. The maggot struck with a powerful force, sending Jack flying backward. Blood sprayed from a gaping wound on his shoulder as he slammed into the ground. C-286 Last Stand, 2. Jack gritted his teeth. His face was pale and strained. Shadows and darkness stretched unnaturally long around him, twisting as if alive. He tried to use his phylactery. But it didn't activate. Panic seeped into his expression. He couldn't revive himself in another body. What is happening? Several seconds passed while he was stunned by the lack of his unique trait activation. The ground beneath him cracked, as the corruption spread. The oppressive atmosphere seemed to sap the strength from his very core. Is it because of this? He thought while staring at the screen before his eyes. The void corrupts you. At Nobleman at. The void has corrupted a portion of your seed of existence. Void. He had no idea how it worked. It wasn't taught in the academy and this was his first encounter with it. Slowly, Jack's abilities were sealed completely. He could only watch with a stunned expression as a maggot pounced on his head, its multiple eyes gleaming with hunger. There was no time for Jack to dodge or for Emma to help him. Her focus was split as she tried to help other awakeners from the writhing abominations. Sweat dripped down her brow as she clenched her fists, her limited abilities pushed to their breaking point. Just as Jack was about to be eaten, Thanatos came out from his shadow. He grabbed Jack and dodged the maggot with him. Neo. Jack's voice was hoarse, and filled with disbelief. There was a lot he had to say. He wanted to ask if Neo was truly so busy that he couldn't use 5 minutes to meet him. Was it only Jack who thought of Neo as a friend? Before he could voice his thoughts, he noticed something. You are not Neo. I am though, said Neo as he temporarily took control of the intent clone. His voice was calm but carried a weight of urgency that left no room for argument. Without waiting for Jack to say anything, Neo rushed toward Emma. His movements were sharp and decisive, like a blade slicing through water. Give me cover, he told her. Got it. She complied without asking anything. The ground beneath her feet trembled as she summoned more walls of darkness. They rose like jagged obsidian, blocking the advancing swarm of maggots. For a moment, the noise of the battlefield became dim as the trio was protected with the walls of darkness. Neo crouched in front of Jack with an unreadable expression. He inspected the purple cracks spreading across Jack's body. Can you use your traits or abilities? Quote. Jack, we don't have time. I can't. Jack's expression was grim. He had stayed behind to help Neo stop the end of the world, but now he had become useless as soon as the battle started. The cracks pulsed, and Jack's body convulsed briefly as the corruption spread further. Meanwhile, Emma's situation grew dire. The walls of darkness began to crack under the relentless assault of the maggots. One broke through, lunging at her with horrifying speed. She barely managed to dodge, retaliating with a shadow spear that pushed the creature out of the walls. Neo's gaze snapped toward her. Hold on a little longer. Emma gritted her teeth. Her legs trembled due to exhaustion. Don't worry about me. Just focus on your task, she muttered, summoning another wall to replace the shattered one. Neo's hands glowed faintly as he placed them on Jack's chest. Don't worry. Your abilities can be healed, Neo said. Your seed of existence has been corrupted by the void, that's why you can't use anything. Check your status. You should have gained void affinity. Now you need to start from the bottom again to gain all of your abilities back. No one was born with void affinity. Only those corrupted by the void gained void affinity. When it happened, the awakeners' abilities would revert to 0. After being corrupted, Godblood could be awakened again, but it was tough to achieve. Thanatos explained everything to Jack. You aren't needed here anymore. Go back, he added. The Shadow Supreme would send you to a different world. No, Jack answered with a clenched jaw. He was prepared to die there. Besides, he could tell Neo was not going to escape either. I wasn't asking. It was an order. Thanatos placed his hand over Jack's shoulder and activated his trait, Mind Control. Mind Control was the evolved version of the Mind Invasion trait he took from anomaly number 33. Divine energy flowed out from Thanatos' hand and seeped into Jack's forehead. Leave this world. And no. Thanatos frowned when Jack managed to resist the mind control. Hesitation appeared on his face. He could increase the power of mind control, but it had a high chance of leaving permanent brain damage on Jack. This destructive nature of mind control was why Thanatos rarely used this trait. It would fry the person's brain and turn them stupid almost every time. Jack. Emma turned around and spoke to him. She had noticed what Neo was trying to do. Please leave. No, I won't. Emma bit her lips, noticing Jack's resistance. I'm sorry, she whispered. She used her concept and called upon darkness. Using darkness, she tried to wear down Jack's mental defenses, allowing Thanatos' mind control to work properly. Jack's eyes grew hazy. He opened his mouth. I want to go. Even though under mind control, he struggled to not say the words. However, it was useless. Back. A door made of shadows appeared next to the trio. Its surface rippled like liquid darkness. The oppressive air seemed to shift slightly as the portal materialized, offering a sliver of hope amidst the chaos. However, only Neo and Jack could use it. Without wasting any time, Thanatos grabbed Jack and threw him through the door. Jack barely had time to react as the shadows engulfed him, pulling him into the unknown. The door closed behind him with a faint, echoing thud, leaving no trace of its existence. Emma's tense shoulders relaxed slightly as a look of relief crossed her face. She didn't know where Jack had gone, but judging by Thanatos' expression, she knew he was safe now. The swirling sea of maggots around them, however, didn't allow her much time to dwell on her thoughts. Suddenly, the wall of darkness shielding them shattered with an explosive crack. The maggots surged forward, their shrieks deafening. Thanatos reacted instantly, scooping Emma into his arms and leaping back to avoid the onslaught. "Aren't you going to leave too?" Emma asked. "No," Thanatos replied with a firm tone. "This is my world. I'll either save it or die along with it. Isn't this Jack's world too?" "It is, but I'm a hypocrite." Emma chuckled lightly, despite the gravity of their situation. C-287, Angel of Void. She didn't immediately return to the fight. Instead, she leaned against the rocky wall to catch her breath while Thanatos kept the maggots at bay. His sword moved like a storm. "You were desperate to send Jack away, but you don't seem to care if I die here," Thanatos said suddenly. Quote. "I mean it," he continued. "Do you hate me?" Emma laughed softly, shaking her head as she retrieved her staff, having rested enough. As she stepped forward to rejoin the battle, she answered him while swinging her weapon to release tendrils of darkness that attacked the maggots. "Yes, I don't like you," she admitted. "It's because I feel like Jack cares more about you than he cares about me." Thanatos, still under Neo's control, chuckled, as he deflected a maggot's lunge. "You sound like a jealous wife." Emma smirked and retaliated against wave of creatures. "And you sound like an arrogant ass." "I do." Thanatos smirked. "I don't like you either, to be honest. Jack is going to be in despair because he left everyone to die. Especially you, whom he cared about a lot. Wouldn't he worry about you too?" Emma countered. "No, he won't," Thanatos said. "Because I'm immortal." Despite the grim situation, the two bantered as they fought, throwing quips and insults back and forth. Thanatos did it purposefully. He didn't want Emma to drown in regret during her final moments. He couldn't protect her. The least he could do was make sure she was laughing before her final moments. Before his eyes, Emma's limbs were torn apart by the maggots. "Emma!" Thanatos roared. He fought harder, pushing the maggots back, but it was too late. She was gone. Moments later, his own body shattered. The maggots swarmed him, and ate him. Awakener Association Headquarters, Turkey. Thanatos gasped for air. His chest heaved as he leaned against the blood-streaked walls of the broken headquarters. His right hand had been destroyed, hanging uselessly at his side. Corpses of Awakeners littered the ground around him. Their faces were frozen in expressions of pain and determination. Despite the losses, the Awakeners hadn't given up. Even after the deaths of Ares and Kronos, they fought relentlessly, refusing to despair. Thanatos gritted his teeth and raised his sword with his remaining hand. The blade trembled under the strain, but his resolve remained the same. Divine Swordsmanship 7th Stance, Tenraisen. The sword descended with ferocity. It carried enough force to level a hill. But the maggots were unrelenting. Their grotesque forms absorbed the blow easily. Not yet, Thanatos thought. His vision blurred. He gripped the sword tighter, slashing again with all his remaining strength. Gaia and a few surviving Awakeners were still inside the headquarters. He had to protect them. He had to hold the line. A massive maggot rammed into his abdomen, sending him flying into the cracked walls. His sword slipped from his grasp as he crumpled to the ground. Blood dripped from his mouth. Despite his injuries, Thanatos gritted his teeth and pushed himself to his feet. His legs trembled, exhausted. He gripped his sword tightly, the blade glowing faintly with residual energy. WH-DY-UF+IT. The voice echoed from every direction. It sounded like an unearthly cacophony of painful screeches, like nails grinding against a chalkboard. The sound was unbearable, and Thanatos' ears began to bleed. He winced. "Shut the fuck up," he said. Thanatos, now under Neo's control, surveyed the situation quickly. His eyes darted to the horde closing in, then back to the 5 pillars figure looming in the distance. He raised his sword and pointed it at the writhing mass of maggots. "Fuck you mean why do I fight?" he muttered while gasping. "It's to kill you." "You can't," the voice retorted. Its tone was a mixture of mockery and scorn. That world time spell requires an enormous amount of energy to activate. That's why you people were using the world core itself as a battery. But now, the energy of this world, its mana, has disappeared. The voice paused, its sinister laughter echoing through the battlefield. Are you saying you alone can generate enough mana for it? Thanatos' grip on his sword tightened. He clenched his jaw, ignoring the creeping numbness spreading from the purple cracks across his body. So it was Typhon, he replied. What? Only that damned fucker knew about the future, thanks to the Child of Mana. Thanatos continued, he must have been the one who told you about the world time spell and how to take us out. The voice hesitated for a moment. At Nobleman at. The shifting clouds above darkened further as if reflecting its growing frustration. But then, it laughed again, louder and more menacing than before. So what? It sneered. You can't do anything about it anymore. But Thanatos' gaze didn't waver. He hadn't given up. The voice, sensing this, grew angrier. Angered, it commanded the maggots, an extension of its body, to tear apart Thanatos. Neo frowned. The connection with both intent clones had been severed. Damn it, he muttered under his breath. His grip tightened on his sword. Each step he took toward the North Pole felt heavier than the last, as the exhaustion caught up to him. The biting cold of the desolate tundra wrapped around him, but he paid it no mind. Snowflakes fell gently, their purity a cruel contrast to the chaos and corruption spreading across the world. The land was eerily silent, save for the distant, guttural screeches of the maggots hunting him. He couldn't save anyone. As if mocking his efforts, a translucent screen flickered into existence before his eyes. 80% of the population has been killed. Quest. See the end of the world has been completed. Reward. Level up, Mind Invasion, X3. The notification remained in front of his eyes. It was a bitter reminder of his failures. Trait, Mind Invasion, is already at max level. The Express will be converted and used to level up the evolved version of Mind Invasion. Mind Control, Grade 3 Mythic. Progress. 30% right pointing arrow 90%. C288 True Immortality. Neo could hear the laughing voice of the angel when his expression faltered. At that moment, a maggot managed to reach him and bit his hand. He cleaved away the damaged part before using his blessing to regenerate the wound. His breathing was becoming heavy as he kept healing himself. However, he had no other choice. To fight the maggots, he needed to be in his best condition. At Nobleman at. He tried to use the Essence Breath spell to refill his empty divine energy reservoirs. It was useless. The world core, having been corrupted, could not generate mana anymore. There was no energy present in the air that Neo could absorb. Days passed as he kept moving northward with no rest. The void corrupts you. The void corrupts you. The void corrupts you. The void corrupts you. The purple cracks continued to spread on his limbs. But Neo ignored them. He had void affinity because he had been infected by the void since long ago. It probably happened when the void window wiped out the Hephaestus clan. Unlike Jack, Neo wouldn't lose all of his abilities. However, how long do you think you can last? Your seed of existence is about to be destroyed. The angel stopped paying attention to him when he didn't respond. Days passed. Neo kept moving forward with a single goal in his mind. He had to reach the North Pole and activate the world time spell. He had to. His thoughts came to a stop, and his body stopped moving. Exhausted, he fell into the snow. His limbs wouldn't move, and his thoughts were slowly coming to a stop. Dying to void would destroy his seed of existence. The immortal skill wouldn't revive him from such death. I can't fall here. Neo clawed at the snow and tried to pull his body forward. He gripped the ground. He moved forward. He gripped the ground. He moved forward. His body mindlessly repeated the same actions. Neo's willpower was nigh infinite, and he refused to give up. However, without power to back him up, his willpower was useless. Purple cracks fully covered Neo's skin. 4 days later, his body shattered, and he died. Ellipsis. Gap of dimensions, between Shadow World and Earth dimension. Jack appeared in an empty space. Clarity slowly returned to his hazy eyes. He turned around, looking from where he had come, hoping to find the door of shadows. However, it was not there. He covered his face with both hands. Arg. Ah. Ah. A look of despair was present in his eyes as he groaned. His nails dug into his skin, and he started to pull out his hair without realizing what he was doing. His mind was in chaos, and it failed to register the physical pain. The pain of losing everyone was tearing him apart. A human-sized doll materialized before Jack. She placed a hand over his hand, and a foreign power entered Jack's head through her hand. Calm down. Instantly, clarity returned to Jack's eyes. The chaos swirling in his mind subsided. He looked at the doll in front of him. "We are J number 48, a gatekeeper of Shadow World," she introduced herself. "Since you have left the Shadow World, we will be sending you. Send me back to the Shadow World. Please," Jack pleaded. "That isn't possible. I'll do anything that the Shadow Supreme wants from me. Just send me back. I can't let them all die." "We can't do that." Jack didn't shout or get angry. After J number 48 calmed his emotions, he could think clearly, and he understood that shouting at her would only make the other party reluctant to help him. Besides, J number 48 looked at him with a confused gaze. "Why are you so sure everyone will die? For one, Neo Hargraves will definitely survive." Jack number 48 seemed sure of her words. "He is an immortal." Ellipsis. Shadow World. Neo's body crumbled into dust. His soul and core suffered the same fate. The same thing happened to his seed of existence when suddenly something astonishing occurred. A little less than half of his seed of existence still remained. The corruption from the void flared again. His seed of existence, which was now 1/4 of its original size, shrank again. However, for some reason, it couldn't be destroyed completely. It shrank to 1/8 of the original size of his seed of existence. The same thing kept on repeating. Instead of being completely erased, a small portion of Neo's seed of existence remained before it got reduced again. Eternal. Currently, the skill was at the peak of grade 2. It reduced all types of harmful effects and damages by 40%. To understand how it was protecting Neo's seed of existence from being destroyed, one had to understand how corruption killed anyone. As an example, corruption of void could be compared to a gun. If someone was shot at their heart, what would be the cause of their death? The bullet, or the stopping of the heart that pumped blood. One could say the person died due to the bullet. But the actual reason, in the given example, was death due to damage to a vital organ necessary for survival. After all, if the heart could be saved, the person wouldn't die. But if the heart stopped, the person would die even if the bullet had stopped. It was the same for Neo's current situation. The bullet was the corruption, and his heart was his seed of existence. The corruption of the void was too strong for Neo to resist. It destroyed his seed of existence completely. Or it was supposed to. The corruption of void and the destruction of his seed of existence were two different events. They were related events, but they were still different. Eternal reduced the corruption of void by 40%. However, the remaining 60% of corruption was strong enough to kill Neo. In this case, Eternal couldn't help him. The remaining 60% of corruption caused his seed of existence to be destroyed, completely. This was another type of attack. Eternal again reduced the damage by 40%. Instead of being destroyed completely, only 2/3 of his seed of existence was destroyed. Of course, it didn't change his current situation. The corruption continued to attack the remaining portion of Neo's seed of existence. What Eternal did was delay its destruction. To explain it with another example, we could think of Neo's seed of existence as the number 1. Corruption was supposed to reduce his number 1 foot to number 0 instantly. However, Eternal resisted the damage, and the number 1 was reduced to only number 0.4. Again, corruption attacked him, and Eternal protected him again. The number reduced from 0.4 to 0.16. Then to 0.064. Then to 0.0256, and so on. Eternal turned the instantaneous destruction of Neo's seed of existence into an infinitely long process. The skill would keep a small portion of his seed of existence alive. It by itself was nothing special. A portion of the seed of existence could not do anything. However, Neo had another skill that was perfectly synergized with the Eternal skill. Immortal. The skill could revive him as long as his seed of existence remained. Time remaining. 11 hours, 59 minutes. Time remaining. 11 hours, 58 minutes. Time remaining. 11 hours, 56 minutes. Time remaining. 11 hours. Time remaining. 10 ho. Time remaining. 6 ho. Time remaining. 4. Time. Opening square bracket ellipsis dot closing square bracket. Time remaining. 00 hours, 00 minutes. C289 unique skill, Eternal, has been mastered. Time remaining. 11 hours, 59 minutes. Time remaining. 11 hours, 58 minutes. Time remaining. 11 hours, 56 minutes. Time remaining. 11 hours. Time remaining. 10 ho. Time remaining. 6 ho. Time remaining. 4. Time. Opening square bracket ellipsis dot closing square bracket. Time remaining. 00 hours, 00 minutes. 12 hours have passed since your death. You will be forcefully revived. A surge of power burst forth from Neo's seed of existence. It enveloped the seed of existence, and the seed of existence started to regrow. Then, his soul materialized, like pieces of shattered glass being glued back together. Bones appeared, followed by organs, muscles, nerves, and finally, skin and hair. Neo gasped. He looked at his arms in surprise. That fucking worked. This was the main reason he had chosen the eternal skill. However, he wasn't sure it would work, and he had never tried it due to the dangers associated with it. How? The voice of the angel entered Neo's ears. How are you alive? It commanded its maggots to eat him. Neo didn't wait for them to attack and fought back. Being surrounded by maggots, he was eaten quickly without being able to put up proper resistance. However, the same situation repeated. Eternal saved his seed of existence from being destroyed. And, time remaining. 00 hours, 00 minutes. 12 hours have passed since your death. You will be forcefully revived. How are you alive? The sea of maggots attacked him as soon as he was revived. Unlike last time, he quickly got into a stance. But there wasn't much he could do. Time remaining. 00 hours, 00 minutes. 12 hours have passed since your death. You will be forcefully revived. As soon as he was revived, he activated the shadow movement spell and moved towards the North Pole. His goal wasn't to fight the angel. It was to activate the world time spell. The maggots caught up to him and tore his body apart. Time remaining. 00 hours, 00 minutes. 12 hours have passed since your death. You will be forcefully revived. He commanded Beelzebub to devour the maggots. Time. The caterpillar was revived together with him. He started to suck time from the monsters. However, no matter how much time he devoured, it didn't seem like it was having any effect. Damn it, how old are these things? Neo cursed under his breath as a giant maggot crushed him. Time remaining. 00 hours, 00 minutes. 12 hours have passed since your death. You will be forcefully revived. Time remaining. 00 hours, 00 minutes. 12 hours have passed since your death. You will be forcefully revived. The situation repeated again, and again, and again. The angel started to get irritated. No matter how much it attacked, Neo was revived, and he kept moving towards the North Pole. And he was getting stronger. Each death of his strengthened the death surrounding him. Time remaining. 00 hours, 00 minutes. 12 hours have passed since your death. You will be forcefully revived. Error. You do not have stacks left for immortal. The skill failed to activate. It didn't matter. Eternal still worked, and it kept his seed of existence from being wiped out. Once it was midnight, the immortal skill gained a new stack. Then, 12 hours have passed since your death. You will be forcefully revived. He was revived again. Just die. The wall of maggots crashed on top of him. Neo, however, having experienced it time and again, moved out of its path. He dodged the maggots. The process of dying, reviving, and taking a small step towards the North Pole continued for an unknown amount of time. Neo didn't give up. He refused to give up. Every time he was revived, he instantly moved toward the North Pole. Even though he was killed quickly. Even though the progress he made each time was small. He kept moving forward, step by step, unrelentingly. But one day, he received another message. 100% of the population has died. Quest. Be the last human alive, completed. Reward. Level up, Eternal X1, Whisper of Time X1. A powerful blow struck Neo. He flew back, his body bouncing off the snow. After he came to a stop, he didn't stand back immediately to dodge the maggots. Would you like to use Whisper of Time? At Nobleman at. Tip. Whisper of Time can leave behind a voice of time. Neo recalled the moments when he had been close to dying from time deaths while awakening his time element. Back then, he had started to hear voices of time as he came close to dying from unremembrance and time slipping. I can leave behind a voice of time like that. But won't only those who are about to die from time deaths hear the voice I leave behind? Even then, it depends on my luck if they can hear it or not. Still, Neo used the Whisper of Time. There was no guarantee the world time spell would activate. He didn't have the energy to activate it either. The voice of time, although a gamble, could help him send a message to the past, present, and future. It could turn around the current situation. Whisper of Time X1 has been activated. Please leave your message. Information flowed into Neo's head, informing him of the length of the message he could leave behind. I'm Neo Hargraves, who interfered with the past for my own gains. Due to my actions, the past changed, and it caused the world to be destroyed. If you want to save the world, protect the child of Mana from Typhon. His breath left white mist in the cold air. Please. Whisper of Time X1 has been used. Neo kept staring at the sky. Nothing changed. As the maggots ate his body, only a single sentence left his lips. Looks like no one got the message, or they failed to change the past. Instead of falling into despair, Neo started to move again. The aura of death and darkness exploded out from his body, throwing back the maggots. He used Obidus as a crutch to stand. As he fought the maggots while moving northward, the screen flashed before his eyes again. Would you like to use Eternal Level Up X1 card? Yes. Eternal. Grade 2 Mythic. Progress. 100%. A powerful aura exploded from Neo's body. His body started to evolve. He didn't stop to meditate or focus on his breakthrough. His actions caused his divine energy to go wild during the breakthrough and destroy his body. The energy raged unchecked, shattering his bones and rupturing his veins. His body was destroyed repeatedly. However, he regenerated it again and again using the third stage of his blessing. He looked like a monster, red lightning and black muscles swirling around him as his muscles and body broke and continuously healed while he fought the sea of maggots. Eternal. Grade 1 Mythic. Progress. 100%. After the trait was upgraded, the screen appeared before his eyes. He was surprised to see his trait's progress had carried over. It must be because I used the system to upgrade the trait and because the trait was about to evolve anytime now. Unique skill Eternal has been mastered. 3 unique skill evolutions have been unlocked. Chapter 290. Choose a new unique skill. Neo stared at the screen flashing before his eyes. Please choose one unique skill. 1. Infinite. Increase your energy reservoir by the power of 2. 2. Primogenitor. Allows modification of the direction of the traits, skills, or even physical and magical attributes, to a certain degree, as they evolve and grow. 3. Finality. Allows user to use the power of ultimate end. Neo frowned when he saw the options for his eternal skill evolution. Those are quite surprising options. His body kept dodging the maggots as he focused on understanding the difference between the skills. He died, but he didn't pay it any mind and shifted his focus to reading it again when he was revived. Infinite was the best suited for his current need. World Time spell required a huge amount of energy to activate. Energy he didn't have. The infinite skill would increase his divine energy reservoir by the power of 2 at every rank up. This increase would be done after his divine energy increased naturally due to his rank up. If he had 2 units of total divine energy when he was grade 5 Empyrean demigod, he would have a total of 3 units of divine energy reservoir at grade 4. Then the infinite skill would activate, and his divine energy reservoir would become 9 units at grade 4. While other demigods would have only 3 units of divine energy reservoir at grade 4 Empyrean, Neo would have 9 units. It was a huge difference. At grade 3 Empyrean, others' divine energy would increase from 3 to 4 units. Neo's divine energy would go from 9 to 10, the infinite would activate. He would have 100 units of divine energy at grade 4 Empyrean demigod thanks to infinite skill. The gap between Neo and others would keep increasing with his each rank up. When I go up from grade 5 to grade 4, the infinite skill would be upgraded too. That means instead of the increase being a power of 2, it could become a power of 3. This was while ignoring the fact Neo had another trait, and infinite would work on it too. Neo already had a much larger pool of divine energy than other demigods. This skill would strengthen his strong points. Insane. That was all Neo could say. The degree of evolution of his trait, going from eternal to the next level, was devastatingly high. It must be because of everything I'm going through. The options for evolution were born out of the demigod's personal experience. It was obvious Neo, who had gone through hell and worse in the past 4 decades, would receive powerful unique skills to choose from. Primogenitor was quite abstract. It would help him modify the direction of growth of his traits, physical abilities, magic spells. For example, when his mind control reached the peak of grade 1, he could get emotion control and illusion crafting unique skills as the options for rank up. But with his primogenitor trait, he could control the direction of growth of his mind control trait. Doing this, he could get different options for unique skill evolution like subtle manipulation and mass influence. Or so Neo thought. The basic information of the primogenitor unique skill that appeared in his mind was limited. He would have to use the skill to understand how it worked. This sounds like a good skill, but it's too complicated. Choosing this is a gamble. What if the modifications will be minor? Neo's thoughts were cut short when a maggot bit his neck. He died. Time continued to move. 12 hours have passed since your death. You will be forcefully revived. Error. You do not have stacks left for immortal. Error. You do not have stacks left for immortal. Error. You do not have stacks. Error. You do. Error. The screen kept flashing. At midnight, the immortal skill gained a new stack, and Neo was revived. Let me look at the options, would you? Neo roared. He slashed downwards. The air was torn apart, and the ground cracked for as far as the eyes could see. His attack, while powerful, did nothing to the maggots. Damn it. Neo shifted his focus to his unique skill options. Finality's description was short. The skill sounded like a high-level version of Death Element Mastery. It sounded too good to be true. And Neo knew why he was feeling this way. Finality definitely has the power to harm the angel, but can I use it? If his current mastery of death was equal to a Formula 1 race car, then Finality was a space shuttle. Both vehicles were fast, but the difference in their speed was incomparable. Finality would allow him to use a space shuttle immediately. But, I don't have the fuel to run a space shuttle. The vehicle might have changed. However, it still needed fuel to run. Neo's divine energy purity was far from being able to fuel a space shuttle. He would need to use considerable time to train and increase his divine energy purity. By that time, his death element mastery could naturally reach the level of the finality unique skill. The finality skill still had its boons. He might not be able to use the skill indefinitely. He could, however, definitely use it for a few seconds at the least. If he used the skill to damage the vital parts of the angel, he might have a chance at bringing it down. There is no way the angel would let me reach its vital parts easily. Neo shook his head bitterly. Leaving a fatal injury on the angel was too grand of a goal for someone who was dying to the maggots without being able to put up proper resistance. After reading the skill descriptions, Neo thought about what he should choose. Infinite was no different from having an infinite divine energy pool. Primogenitor allowed him to optimize his growth, remove the growth he didn't want, and add nobleman at. Keep only the growth he wanted. With the skill, he could become a unique being. Finality gave him strong firepower. It was a simple yet powerful skill. I guess I'll choose this. Neo made his decision. Energy started to spring forth from his core as he underwent earth-shattering changes. The barren land beneath him trembled violently. Fissures spread like cobwebs across the scorched ground. The air, heavy with tension, shimmered with an ethereal glow, and a low hum resonated in the atmosphere. He underwent the breakthrough. The scene of the past few days, where his body broke and regenerated, growing stronger as he fought the maggots, repeated somewhat differently. Unlike the past, the devastation caused by his aura was simply too vast. The snow-capped peaks were pulverized into dust. The land began to shatter. And the air crackled with energy. Neo exhaled putrid breath when the breakthrough ended. He looked at his own body in surprise. He could feel himself filled with boundless power. His body felt light, and with each step he could cover hundreds of meters, moving at a speed far faster than a normal grade 5 Empyrean demigod could. Status: Neo Hargraves. Rank: Grade 5 Empyrean. Divine Energy Purity: Grade 1 Empyrean. Stats: Strength: 586. Speed: 602. Dexterity: 583. Constitution: 597. Luck: 0. Affinity: Death, Shadow, Darkness, Void, Water, Time, Holy. Magic spells: Necrotic Touch, Ocean's Embrace, Essence Breath, Rewind Enchantment, Black Dawn of Despair, Shadow Movement, Shadow Space. Incantations: O Death, be my hands, crush my enemies. O Death, become my blade. O Shadows, by my will, appear and spy, a fleeting shade beneath the sky. O Shadows, from the abyss where terrors dwell, emerge, claws of night, fangs of dread, by my hand, thy leash is led. O Shadows, beast of twilight, bound by shade, guardian of the dark cascade. With fangs of night and eyes that gleam, arise, Shadowfang, from my dream. O Darkness, mark this soul with night's despair, break their courage, leave them bare. O Darkness, steal their breath, make their strength decay. Trait: Bloodline trait. Monarch of Death. Fragmented trait. Mind invasion. Quest. Complete Barbados. Training Part 2, completed 0/1. End of the world questline. His stats were 150 to 200 higher in every stat than a normal grade 5 Empyrean demigod. It was thanks to his training and him using darkness to devour his opponents for past 4 decades. Thanks to his bad luck, Neo had to devour countless beings to gain such huge amount of stats. He had nearly gone insane multiple times. But it helped him gain the concept of true darkness when he overcame the insanity. Neo gained the holy element after completing the 5th trail, which was becoming a grim reaper. As for the quest of making the mind invasion permanent, he completed it thanks to Gaia. She was able to fuse the fragmented trait into his seed of existence permanently. In exchange for her help, she asked Neo to protect her from assassinations and help her solve other problems too. It was why he took the mantle of Thanatos. The reward of the quest were 3 link locks. Link locks allowed him to bind his traits together. The stronger trait could pull the weaker trait along and he could level it up more easily. Currently, he had used 1 link lock to bind Monarch of Death and Mind Invasion.